Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
Hey everyone, welcome back, and if this is your first time listening, welcome to the East Meets West Hunt podcast. Today's episode, I have a good friend of mine and a big public land bow hunter, Johnny Stewart. And Johnny and I met a few years back, and this guy had impressed me from the first time I met him, from his just kind of, not even saying how the deer on his wall, which are extremely impressive, but more or less his off-the-wall thinking and tactics that when it comes to hunting whitetails, it's nothing that you read about in any magazine or anything along those lines. He just knows how to read the woods and learn deer in whatever particular area he's hunting and comes through and kills these deer. So I would say, this podcast is probably the longest one that I've released yet. So I would recommend getting out a notebook and writing down some notes during this one, because John gives a lot of really, really good advice on this one for hunting, public land whitetails, from the mountains in Pennsylvania and southern Ohio to the farm country public land in Iowa and Illinois and everywhere else that he's hunted. So highly recommend listening to this one, taking notes, and I think you can learn a lot from it. So with that being said, I kind of want to give an update here. I ended up getting out hunting again here in Pennsylvania. Late season archery and flintlock muzzleloader is in, and I hadn't hunted. It opened the day after Christmas, but I haven't got to go out hunting yet, and I wanted to test out some new gear and just kind of get back in the tree stand again. So here on January 5th, I got out for an evening hunt, and I went into a spot I hunted in the rut, actually, that I knew the does were bedded really close to me. I was seeing them in the middle of the day, everything else. And if you follow my personal Instagram page, you'd see I had posted the videos on my story of the does that were just moving in the middle of the day. Everything else, it just seemed like none of them were hot for the bucks to be coming in. But anyways, this spot, the way it's laid out was, I'm sitting on the edge of a logging cut, so it was more of a thinning than a full clear cut. So there's still some big cherry trees and everything that they're going to eventually, harvest and get the timber off of once it gets a little older. But they cut all the other trees out of it, and it's full of blackberry briars and everything else. So it creates a lot of food, as well as some old gas well pads and things like that have ferns and grasses in it that the deer are feeding on. So where the does seem to be bedded was off the backside of the clear cut. There's a steep kind of valley that goes down with a few benches on it, and it's all hemlock trees and pines, and the deer seem to be bedded on there. So I went into this knowing that I was going to have to be really quiet walking in. So after a few mishaps with me driving all the way to the hunting spot and realizing I forgot my bow at home, don't like to admit it, but it happened, and went back, got my bow, and I'm kind of rushed and, have to set up my stand, do the whole bit, and got in there and got it within probably about 200 yards of the stand, and I just started creeping in there. I knew that I needed to get there quickly, but I couldn't risk blowing out those does where they were bedded at. So I did the method I learned through Jim Hole, and actually John talks about it here on this podcast, the heel-toe method. So heel-toe, sounding kind of like a deer walking. And I snuck in, and once I got in there, I realized that the foliage had changed so much. There's no leaves on any of the trees now, so my tree stuck out one a little bit more than it did before, and I could almost see where those does are normally bedded at. And they don't bed in the exact same bed every day, but they, on this one side of the hill, they're there. And So it kind of concerned me. I wasn't sure if they'd seen me or anything else. But anyways, I got out my hawk stand and the climbing sticks, and I set it up and climbed up in the tree, got settled in finally. And I only had probably an hour and 20 minutes left of daylight at that point. I mean, I was real late getting in. And so I was just kind of sitting there waiting. And the way the wind works at this particular spot, and I was set up, I picked this tree for this reason, is so the mountain thermals would be coming up the hill behind me out of where they'd normally be bedded. And then there was a northern wind that was, blowing from left or right to me. Well, then in the evening, as the sun goes down, the thermals go down over the hill towards the bedding, which can be dangerous in its own. But just the way I was set up there, I've never been busted out of it. So it's again learning each area and how the wind plays those particular spots. And so about quarter to 5. I started hearing some deer movement coming from my right, but kind of out in front of me a little bit. So the wind's blowing that direction, like left to right, but they were out in front a little bit. So the wind's in the deer's favor coming out. They came out a little bit differently than I expected them to, but it was still good for me. It was a marginal wind. So the wind's in the favor for them, but I was just off the wind well enough that, they wouldn't catch me. And actually 7 or 8 does came out, and I was really surprised to see that many deer. And they came out, and leading the herd there was this really big doe, and I had to look a couple times to make sure it wasn't a buck that shedded his antlers already. And the doe came in, kind of walking, came through about I'd estimated 25 yards. I drew, and she went behind some brush, and I was lucky, with all the other eyes that were in this little grassy opening on the edge of the clear cut, that they didn't catch me. And I drew, put the pin on her, and she was walking slowly. And normally I always stop them with a bleat or something, with a mouth bleat. And I don't know why I didn't. I was just kind of caught up in the moment. And the deer was quartering to a little bit, so I held it tight on the shoulder there and pulled through the release, and I watched the nocturnal go way back further than I wanted it to. And I was like, what happened? Did I hit a stick? Did I hit a briar bush? What happened? And now that I'm thinking about it, it's just by the time my brain, told my release basically to go off, she'd already taken another step and put my arrow back about 12 inches, or maybe not that far, but a decent amount further back than I wanted to. And that arrow's sticking out of her, and she's just standing there. So I hurried up and grabbed another arrow, and at this point she kind of walked out and was just standing there. So, and it was kind of in some brush, but I knew that I needed to have a follow-up shot because that first one wasn't great. So I put my rangefinder up 50 yards, put it back in, dialed in my sight. I mean, I had time to do all this. She was just standing there. Drew back again, settled the pin, shot, and I couldn't tell if it was a good hit on the second one or not. But at that point, she ran away. I could see the nocturnal going until it went out of sight a little bit. And then the other deer were just standing there, didn't even do much anything, which is really weird because normally the does in this particular area and stuff, I mean, it's heavily hunted and everything else, so you'd expect them to be, taken off. And they didn't. Eventually they did, and I heard some snorting and everything else, and they ran out. But so anyways, I'm just kind of disgusted with myself in that first shot, but the deer was limping really bad. And what I ended up finding out was, because of the angle and everything, I shot and it went out the back leg. So it went through like liver, guts, and right out through the back leg. And I didn't think my arrow passed through, but it didn't completely pass through, but the iron will went the whole way through the bone out the other side. And And I was like, I'm going to have to wait her out. I can't, chase her right now. Then at this point, it's getting close to dark. So I just took my stand down real quietly and packed everything up and walked out of there, snuck out and waited about, I think it was 4 or 5 hours before I came back in. And so we came back in. My dad, my uncle came with me, and I had grabbed my Kafaru and everything. I was going to plan on packing her out. It was a little ways back in there and some steep terrain. So went in and ended up finding that nocturnal. The arrow broke off and found that not far from where I lost her out of sight. And so it just kept following the blood trail, and it was a pretty good blood trail. Like it was real good. You could tell she was hurt bad, and then ended up finding the deer. Dead. So that was a sense of relief for how bad of a shot I essentially made on her, and I was kind of sick about it, and the fact that I did that shot while she was walking and everything. So that wasn't something I was real happy with myself about. But anyways, nonetheless, she was dead, and so we quartered up the deer, did the gutless method again like I did on my rifle buck, and put the deer in game bags and packed her out. So the weird thing is I haven't found the other piece of my arrow with my broadhead on it, and I meant to go back in and look for it here, and by the time this release I'm sure I'd been back in there but to try to look for it, but I don't know what happened. I figured it was going to be stuck in her there, but that other half of the arrow came out the other side. So I mean, that's a good reason, that I and she only went probably, I don't know, 80 yards from me, but it just was so thick that I lost her out of sight. And it was a good thing, I think, that I left her lay, 'cause she didn't seem to be, dead for very long. We were still warm and wasn't, locked up or anything, and it was below freezing. But anyways, so I packed up that deer, got her out. It was probably a little bit after midnight or so by the time we got the deer out of the woods. Really big doe, got a lot of good meat off her and everything. So I was happy with the result of it. Not happy with kind of how it went down, but it just comes down to I'm a person that if I need to, I'm gonna shoot more arrows if you need to. I'm a big proponent of shooting until they're down. Yeah, I didn't want to rely on that first shot to kill her there, and I did hit her with that other arrow. So got up to her, found her, got her out, and that was that. So that was a good way to kind of start off 2019 and end my 2018-19 archery season. Finally got to put one on the ground with the bow, and that was that. So it just you'll hear some more lessons here on this podcast with John about late season hunting, which he's a big proponent of and has done extremely well with that. So that being said, let's get right into the podcast here with John, and thanks everyone for listening. If you would, if you are listening on iTunes or anything like that, please leave a review, rating. That kind of stuff helps out a lot for me and the podcast here. Enjoy. All right, we're back for another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast. Sitting here in my basement with my good buddy Johnny Stewart. Johnny, how's it going?
Pretty good, Bo. Had a good day today. Found a couple sheds. Muzzleloader's still in, but seems like they're losing their horns up here early this year, which is good and bad, So
yeah, we're recording this on December 29th, and it already seems like a lot of these bucks are losing their antlers.
Yeah, you're right. Buddy of mine found 6 already. I like late season. I like muzzleloader hunting, but it seems like it's kind of like when they're losing their horns, there ain't much you could do, but start picking them up. So
yeah, that's for sure. But you already have your buck tag filled here in Pennsylvania, at least, so you're not worried about if they're losing their horns now, right?
Yeah, you're right. Just kind of getting ready for next year. So
yeah. Yeah, that's it's always fun to get out this time of year, and like you and I were talking about before we started recording here, it's just as fun to get out and kind of plan for the next year and stuff as it is hunting a lot of times, you know.
Yeah, when you get older, I think it's like, man, you just want to. It's not all about killing. I've said that before. I like learning about the deer. It seems like when you go in the woods and you see new areas and see sign, or if you find a shed, rubs, anything, it kind of like stimulates your brain. It's like, oh, look here, and you keep going and keep learning, but you'll never stop learning about the whitetail. You know, it's just like a never ending. You think you know a lot, then next year comes up, look, I learned this, I learned that, and you just keeps. I think I'm just like a student, and I like learning about them. It's not even, killing is kind of takes a back seat to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah. When you texted me when you killed your Iowa buck, what was that, last week? Was that 2 weeks ago?
No, that was before Christmas. So yeah, that was 2 weeks ago.
Okay. And you texted me and you're like, got it done in Iowa. It's kind of disappointing at the same time because when you don't have the tag in your pocket anymore, you're like, as soon as you pull the trigger, you're happy, but at the same time, you're kind of disappointed because you're like me and you like to just keep hunting.
Yeah, it's like you got to be happy when you pull that trigger. It might not be the biggest deer or whatever, but you chose to take an animal's life, so that's it. You're done. But but you kind of like, oh, it's over, So I do. I try to hunt different states, and like you said earlier, we'll maybe talk about some late season. I love late season hunting. Granted, I hunt, the rut. Everybody likes the rut, but I feel late season. All the land I hunt is usually public. The pressure is down, and they're, they have to eat, so. That's the best time to pattern them, and their guards down. I know in the past few, not so much in the past 2 or 3 years, I haven't really killed a lot of deer, but there was a streak there that I was pretty much not killing a deer till December, late December into January, because it was like I was looking for maybe bigger deer, and then, it seemed to got to the point where, man, I better start shooting something, or it just got to the point where it was like, I still have this state or this tag, and they're still there, and their guards down. It's easier. I love late season muzzleloader bow hunting, but it's just I think it's just not. I don't want to say easier, but it's you can pattern them. It's just, if you find the food, you could pretty much kill them through the food.
Yeah, and see, I had never really thought a whole lot about late season hunting until I met you, and you're like, you're missing out on a lot of good hunting, I just always, hopefully I'd be tagged out by that point, but sometimes I'm not, and I just didn't, I don't know, I just never really thought of it as a time, like when I texted you after our first archery season was over, I'm like, I didn't fill a tag or anything there, I was kind of bummed out. You're like, what do you mean? Hunting's just getting good.
Yeah.
Like it's just getting good at this time. You have a lot of time left to get it done, and hopefully, they don't lose their antlers by this time. But this is kind of a wacky year, not usually that typical. But
I think the number one thing with hunting late season is the number one variable. Any thing that you can't predict is in public hunting areas is the pressure, and that's the biggest. If there was no other people hunting there, it'd be pretty easy to go out there and kill a buck. But the pressure that people put on the deer, that kind of they really live. Sometimes they turn nocturnal in that late season. They're starting to, like I said, come back out, and they'll feed in daylight hours when it's warmer and stuff like that. But pressure is the biggest thing. You hunt. Everybody wants to hunt November. Hunt first week, second week of November. Bow hunt. Oh, that's the best time. And my experience, it could be the best time, but then you get an area that's hunted hard. I think these deer up in this area where we hunt, they're actually, I'm talking 4 or 5 year old deer. The older deer, I feel like they're still nocturnal. The weather. It was kind of cold this year, but in general, fall has been warm. And them big bucks, they're not worried about that first doe, breeding that first doe. They're worried about getting their 1 or 2, 3 does when they want to get them, when it's colder, when there isn't much pressure, when nobody's fighting over the does. Yeah, you can catch them on a hoof midday, but our season ends 10th, 12th of November, and they're not peaking yet. It's the following week that they peak, and people in the woods bear hunting, and they say, "Oh, I seen bucks chasing 3, 4 bucks chasing a doe," and they get dumb. But it seems like you're hunting through October, November. You're like, it's going to get good. It's going to get good. Then here comes the 10th, 11th, 12th. Oh, it's over. And you didn't get the peak. The next time to get out there and hunt is rifle season. And I think up here, Pennsylvania has so many sportsmen, like Michigan, Minnesota, all them states. There's just so many people out there hunting. Everybody travels to the big woods here, and
as you call it, head up north.
Everyone wants to head up north. It's going up north, and there's guys and them bucks that been through a few gun seasons, 4 or 5 year old deer, they know, they can associate with what time of year it is when the guys start shooting their guns and all the roads are busy and there's guys in the woods. And I think they also have, as far as breeding, they have a little break from the peak. So they're kind of like recovering from the breeding, when we get into rifle season. You're looking at like the end of November, the breeding's kind of dying down. And also they know that hunting season, that gun season, there's guys going to be pounding the woods. And they were already in there kind of chasing bear around. So I've been hunting up here probably pretty serious 5-6 years. And I knew of good bucks through November. I didn't get them. And so I'll get them rifle. And I hunted my ass off rifle hunting. Not even seen them. I might get a crack of one here and there, but it's like, where'd they go? It's like they just disappear, which they do. They lay down and they hide from that them gunshots, and they're kind of recovering from that rut, And I think the rut is, them big bucks, they kind of set the schedule, on what's going on in the woods. And then when they're taking a break, time out, there's guys in the woods, everything kind of like shuts down, And that's why I think the deer start breeding again. I got them on my camera end of December, middle of December. They're out, into January. Even the smaller the fawns that get to a certain weight, then they'll come into estrus. So you got the deer, the buck. They'll be looking for them, the young deer coming in, and then maybe the ones that were getting into estrus around gun season when them bucks, everything was like time out. They'll come in 28 days later. So there's a lot of times I come up here muzzle loader. I mean,
hold on a second, John. So kind of explain a little bit with that, because you were, I'd heard about, a second rut and everything else before, but never really put too much, emphasis on it until I remember a couple years ago, you were showing me some trail camera pictures of some good bucks in first week of January on the tail of some younger does and everything there. And that's, that's never something I thought about. And so how would you, when you're hunting like late season like that, are you hunting out of a tree stand like you normally would, or are you hunting on the ground, or what kind of strategy there?
I usually try to walk a little bit, usually with a muzzle loader, with some soft snow. I just like muzzle loader hunting. I rarely, up in this area, take a bow out late season. But I try to get out there with a muzzle loader. I leave cameras out all year, but now I have an area where I think, or I kind of know the deer that time of year are hanging out and they congregate, and I kind of hunt them areas. But yeah, I think if you had, usually I hunt alone a lot, and you could do some like one-man drives and that. If like I tell everybody, don't shoot your deer in archery if you don't shoot what you want. Go late season, come up here. I know where there's deer. They hang out down in these hemlocks or in these pines or here. I kind of, after about 5 years, I know areas where I know the bucks are going to kind of get into their wintering, or not so much wintering, but they kind of herd up a little bit, and does that are all kind of living in the same area. And then you got maybe a doe might be coming in the heat. So, that's why I always try to get other people into it. Flintlock hunting, man, that's the best time. If you get a good fresh snow and you kind of, know where they're at, you can kind of put a little drive on here and there and bump them around. It's like,
What kind of areas are you typically, you said something about like hemlocks and stuff. Is there any like pattern, okay, in the big woods, are you finding a certain area where the deer typically hang out this time of year?
I don't know.
Or
It
does it kinda
depends
depend?
it depends on snow too. If you got a deep snow, they're going to be really maybe in some pines, maybe hemlocks, kind of getting out of that snow, maybe. But deep snow, what I've found out is 18 inches of 2 feet. Anything under that, they really don't. They just kind of plow through it.
They don't really change their
I don't, not
patterns
from
for
what
that.
but I know a few years back they had, all the way up to March, April, we had like 2-3 feet of snow here, and I found a lot of horns. They were just deer. You find them congregating, in the hemlocks or pines, and feeding
find
on
them
sound
going into
slopes.
creek bottoms too a little bit, like when it get heavy snow. I know, like when I'm shed hunting on bad winters, I tend to find more sheds in the creek bottoms. Where if we have a light winter, they seem to be pretty scattered, unless that's just.
Well, it seems like there's a creek close by. Most of this land has some springs and creeks. I feel like they're kind of in that area. That's where the hemlocks are.
They definitely like to dig in those springs. Did you ever
the
notice
springs,
that?
yeah, and they,
If everything else is frozen up, maybe they can
Yep.
dig in there a little bit.
find some grass or ferns. Yeah, definitely.
I always like when it comes down to, just kind of skipping ahead here a little bit, but with shed hunting, we have a bad winter like that. I love finding spring seeps coming off the hills and just kind of scouring up and down those spring seeps, because that's not gonna. It's usually like the last thing to freeze. It seems like, and a lot of times they don't, and they can dig in there a little bit. And I've found sheds, right in those spring seeps before, which is kind of neat to, to realize there. But to kind of go back a little bit back to late season here and where they're at. So if there's snow and stuff, a lot of times it seems like you're walking around and just kind of sneaking along and just trying to find where you're trying to cut a track or find that fresh sign.
kind of
Be mobile.
Yeah, more or less mobile, because you hunt a lot with your bow, and then if you can get an opportunity, I like flintlock. It's really primitive. It's tough. I like just challenging. That's why I hunt the big woods, because it's challenging. You know what I mean? So you get that flintlock. Sometimes it don't go off, but I just like sneak. And it's not all the time you have the perfect conditions, but when you do, you can get on a track, and their guard's down a little bit. You can kind of, and then if you don't really pressure them too much, maybe you can get in there the next day, maybe post on them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're in that area. They're there for a reason. They're not. It's not the time of year where I think they're, especially with the snow, they're going to congregate. Now they'll get into January, February. They'll start moving and being mobile, and you'll find sheds miles apart, because they just there's no reason for them to just stay. There's so much browse, and it's everywhere. It's not like you got a mass crop or something that funnels them to a food source.
Yeah.
But that time of year, they're, it's
Are you is there any particular food sources you're looking for, or do you find them? I mean, I know you hunt similar areas that I do, where there's not even really many oak trees, if any. So there's not really acorns. Even if there are, they're normally gone by that time. But is there any specific food sources that you'd kind of key in on?
Well, it seems like they really like, if you got some snow, a couple inches, try to find some ferns. And they'll, especially on a hillside, they use that gravity. If it's level, they have a hard time moving the snow. But if it's a 40-degree slope or something like that, they can gradually move that snow off that hillside. Where I've seen them, bucks, a turned up stump, for 5 years, or ferns are growing on it. It's just right at their height, and they just reach out and grab that, But the easiest way for them, to find is a south slope, or maybe, the snow's melting, or if it's down right now, they'll dig and they'll eat them ferns. That's where we find a lot of horns in them ferns. Or you find a hemlock tree, usually a single hemlock, he's going to lay under that. They love that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
up here.
you're the same way. When I'm shed hunting later on, if I see a big hemlock tree above everything, I beeline right to it, because normally you'll find a bed under there, and hopefully you'll find an antler. I mean, out of 30 trees, you might find a shed under one of them, maybe. But
Yeah.
I
you always
get
look.
excited.
You always go down and look.
You gotta look.
They love him, little single, especially if you got like a kind of like an open woods, and then you just got spotted hemlocks that are maybe 20, 30 feet tall here and there. That's where they're going to lay. They're going to lay under there. I don't know. It seems like it's maybe a little bit warmer, or just like, less snow, or the boughs come down to where it gives them some cover. But yeah, they're definitely there. But in the past there was a good mass crop of acorns, but that's rare up here. Most of the time it's just browse. But being hunting up here for 5 years, I kind of know where to look come this time of year. I'm talking like after Christmas. That's when muzzleloader starts. Through rifle season, they're kind of holed up. They're scared the first 2 weeks of December. The last day or so of rifle season, they'll start coming out because the number of hunters are down. So you got a chance of seeing one, and they're starting to be more visible because they need some food and they're coming out. But then you get after Christmas, they, like I said, they're just, they're not too worried about the hunting pressure, and they got to feed, but it's just, they kind of gravitate towards certain areas. They're not in them areas where they were during the rifle season when they were hiding out, because they just kind of like, they'll go a mile. They'll just be you'll never find him. You'll think the deer doesn't exist, but he's there alive and he knows where to hide. But their guard's down. I followed 2 bucks last year. It was maybe the 10th of January, and I got on their tracks. It's an area I go to every year. It just seems like that time of year after Christmas, I can walk in there, and it's close to the road. It's just, they just kind of, rifle season, they're not there, but I get in there late season, and I got on 2 good bucks. And I think just by judging, tracking tells you a lot. Just by judging by their tracks, these were big old bucks, and where they took me and how they walked. The one was a bigger buck than the other, and he walked around, down tree, like he had such a big rack on his head. I know what deer they were, because I know what deer lived in that area, and they were some really big bucks, and they were hanging together, that time of year. But then they took me through some beach brush, maybe 300-400 yards, but they just stayed in that thick stuff. Once I got on their tracks, they had a close place by that they can get in and get away from me. I couldn't see 20 yards in that beach brush, but if I had another guy, I could be, all right, they're heading this way, let's try to cut them off. You go set up here, and I know the terrain, I know where they go, but it's usually myself, But another thing, they, like I said, after, January, you get into February, March, after being, hiding from rifle hunters and that, being in that thick stuff where they don't want to be, a lot of the sheds that you find, Bo finds, and Dave finds, and your dad, everybody finds these sheds. A lot of times they're in the middle of the open woods, and there's no rhyme or reason to where they're at. But I just said, hey, they don't have to live in that thick stuff, that beach brush, and them. They got a big rack on their head. They want to be free. They just browse through the open woods, and that's later in February, March, when you find sheds. They're just they're done with the thick stuff. But like when I got on them 2 bucks, I followed them, and they went in that thick stuff. They made a big circle, but I never caught up to them. There wasn't enough. The snow wasn't soft enough. But it's like I tell people every year, I think, man, hey, would you get a flintlock, man? You could shoot 100 yards. You could shoot just as far as you shoot a bow, and these deer are there. You know what I mean? I just need help getting, because you usually don't have the ideal fresh 4 or 5 inches of snow where you can sneak through. It's either not windy or crunchy. A lot of stuff's going against you. Not too often do I post, but I could probably get to that if I keep studying these deer and learn them. I could probably get in an area where I could post up for an evening or an afternoon. Yeah. But just to go, there's not a lot of deer per square mile up here. Just to go out in the woods and I'm going to post here. I don't ever hope to see a deer. I want to know that I'm in a spot that I want to see a deer. I don't want to leave my hunting up to hoping, or wishing, man, I hope this is a good spot. Like, I want to do my homework, but it's just the more time in the woods that you put in, and you learn, and you use your cameras, and we have them out usually all year, and see where they're at and where they're going.
Yeah, like today. You come in, you're like, I forgot I had a camera out in the woods since last rifle season, 2017, and I just found it today. and we were going through the photos of it. And that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was a good deer. I said, Bo, I put a camera out last year, rifle. I always put about 3 or 4 cameras around my waist. I don't take no backpack. I just cinch them to my waist, 3 or 4. I always have 3 on me. Because if you take one, you're like, I don't want to waste it. That's a decent spot. I want to put it here. I'll hold on to it. Then before you know it, you're back at your vehicle. You didn't put a camera out. So if you got 3 of them, you're like, all right, I'll throw one here. Right, I'm throwing here. I'll throw in there. So I've been carrying 2 or 3 with me around my waist. But yeah, I put one out last year, rifle season, in a spot, and there were some good rubs. And I never got back in there to pick it up. And I was there this year rifle hunting, and I just didn't remember where the camera was. I was looking, and then I ended up putting another camera out. Just it was a good spot. And then today I found both cameras, and the one that was there for a year, that one on there, he was a beautiful 8-point.
8-point.
Yeah.
And what was that, the last Saturday in rifle season?
Yeah,
2017 at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, daylight. He's walking.
And, he was there this year. That was the one that was rubbing there this year. I didn't have him on that other camera, but he's 145 inch this year. And I found 2 sheds today right in that area. One's a fresh, one's an old one. But, there's a lot of guys up here shed hunting now from what I hear.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, it's a little early, I think, to be doing that, as far as strictly shed hunting, as far as.
Yeah.
There is a lot of deer, like I said, I've lost them early on, but I had a camera out. I just checked last weekend. Was it last weekend or something? Yeah. Christmas Eve I checked it, and there were 7 bucks on my camera, and they all had both sides on them. So I was expecting.
Yeah, definitely. I think last year before, it was like April, I seen 5-6 bucks together. So you have no clue.
They can drop anywhere. Well, I had one on one of my cameras. I had posted on my Instagram story that it was November 18th, and he lost one side already.
Yeah.
They can lose it, so that's really rare. But say the end of November all the way through April.
Yeah, you're right.
And so I found some bucks. There was this one buck that I was hunting, that really big deer. He lost his antlers every year between rifle season and Christmas. And I don't know why he did it, but that's what he did. And there's some bucks that just hold on for a long time. And
it's just their personality. I don't know. They're done. And, some of them bucks been through them cold winters, and their mind changes from breeding. They don't need them horns, fighting, testosterone. They're just kind of like, I need to recover. A couple of times I've checked my cameras in April, right when it's starting to green up, and you see these bucks, you could tell by the bodies, they're yearlings or 2-year-olds. You could see their ribs. It was a tough winter, they were probably chasing does like you wouldn't believe, and then you got that old one. Like I said, that's what I heard. They get lazy, they get 1 or 2, they're happy, they're like, oh, it's going to be a rough winter. I'm eating sticks and roots and shit, so they, and you get them on a camera in April, you can't even see their ribs. They're still healthy. I think it's all about strong survive, and being healthy, and if they've been through a couple of them winters, them old bucks, they're more worried about survival than they are breeding, believe it or not. Once they get that certain age, been through a couple of them hard winters, they're like,
I can't run my body down too much.
No, they're just like that old bull sitting out there in the field, we're just going to lay. Just all summer, you see him laying by himself. You rarely see him. Just lays around, and he get up and do his breeding, and then, he gets what he needs, and then, all right, I'm going to start recovering. I'm done, so... Yeah, they might drop their horns early, It's tougher here, living in this, part of the country, it's just browse, and, the winters are tougher, and they just adapt, and they survive.
So with, so you hunt, Pennsylvania and, Southern Ohio with, as far as, the big woods, mountain buck type terrain. Do you find any, specific place where you're finding these bucks bedding? Or is this also kind of more boots on the ground and figuring out each area? What is there any certain terrain features or clear cuts, or what are you kind of finding?
Well, I don't think I think in general deer, like a big buck, a bench, a point, but a lot of these areas, maybe a ridge, but a lot of the areas like up in this area that I hunt, a lot of it's flat. There's no topography as far as bedding. they just kind of lay down wherever. I mean, usually, and it's a typical spot there, maybe under a hemlock or something. And the ground here is really irregular. You have like holes and bumps, and it creates little flat spots anywhere in the woods. They could just lay down and have a spot. If there's a slight grade, you got them bumps and holes, and they'll just find a spot and lay down. It's not like. I'm sure there's some, like where I found these sheds today, was a little more mountainous, more topography to it, and they were out on a point, and it was just kind of like typical point, maybe a bench and stuff like that. But a lot of area up here is just so flat. There's a lot of flat land, and it doesn't funnel them. It's just there's no rhyme or reason to where they're gonna. They'll just lay down.
That's a good point, because. I had the guys from Wild at Heart, Warren, Jameson, and Kelly on the podcast. We were talking about buck bedding, and they had brought that up too. Is like most areas they're hunting steeper. They're like, so we'll find them out on these points. Where you get into some of these other areas in the big woods, because not all of it's super steep. Mm-hmm. Some of the areas both you and I hunt aren't really that steep. Yeah. There are a lot of there's topography, but not. They're more rolling type hills and things like that, and there. Me personally, I can't tell you one spot that you're going to find a buck bed.
Yeah, you're right.
Be like, I'm going to go over here.
Yeah, it's not like
buck bed.
That's a buck bedding area. No, it's not like I hunted in southern West Virginia. That's all rugged, and you just find a point in that, and you can find where a buck beds, and you can hunt that spot. But here in this flat country, it's like you'll find a buck bed, but it won't be like, remember this spot. It'll be a big, it's a buck. But it's just like he laid down there. I found a few in the winter this time, but that's different. They're kind of, the snow got them holed up there, and there's some hemlocks you'll find where they might be hanging out. And that's another reason you can kind of muzzleloader hunt and maybe post if you find where they're bedding year to year. You just kind of pussyfoot around there and see them. But as far as just in general, maybe through November, and I had to find in this area a buck bed that's just kind of like, it doesn't really exist. It's just kind of,
and I made
anywhere.
And I made a comment before about that bucks, I have found areas where it seems like bucks bed a lot, but there's other times if I can find a buck that I think, all right, he's using this bed now, you better hunt it right now, because he may use that for a couple days or whatever, and he's moving on. He's doing whatever. I don't think there's and this is, I haven't hunted a ton of farm country in my life, but I've hunted a decent amount, and it seems like they use the same beds a lot.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
And the same, not maybe just one bed, but they'll use a couple beds a lot. Over here, I don't think they do.
But it's just like everywhere's different. Hunting isn't black and white. There was a spot last year I found up here. It was a clear cut. It was not typical. It was 40, 50 acre clear cut, top of the hill. 20-year-old, 30-year-old trees, just big enough you can get in a tree. But this buck was living there like he owned that. I found 50 rubs in there. I didn't see the buck. I just found the spot. I found all his beds in there, and I hunted that spot. I saw him 3 times in there. He was probably 150-inch 8-point, I never got him, but that was not typical to this. You can find stuff like that in different areas, it's there, but not every deer does that. Like that deer lived all the way through rifles, has pictures, and he lived in there. He owned that, and that's not typical. A lot of these deer, but every individual deer is different. Like some are nomads, some will live in a spot like that,
That's one thing that I think you've taught me over the last few years that it's really stuck with me is every deer has its own personality. Comes down to where they live, how much they move. Some may not move very much, like that one.
Yeah,
owned that clear cut. And he may have never left that area very often. Where there's other deer, like the oldest deer I killed when I was 17 years old. He was 8.5 years old. Had trail camera pictures of him 4.5 miles away from where I killed him. He just liked to move, and. And some are more aggressive. You see some bucks that have, tines broken off every year because they're mean and they they're aggressive, and there's other ones that are more timid and they're like, I'd rather not fight him.
It's just like a human, some, I always tell Bill, I said, hey, if you're going to hunt me, you're going to go sit at McDonald's parking lot. Yeah, everybody comes through the drive-thru, everybody eats at McDonald's. No, not everybody. You're not going to see me. That's just like an analogy for put food for thought. You're like, well, yeah, because when I was younger and I started learning about hunting, I read every article, and that was my biggest thing is I was reading these articles, but you don't know who was writing these articles. I was reading articles from people that maybe lived in the Midwest and more deer and private land. So it depends on what your situation is. You got to learn about hunting. That's because every situation is different. I remember I read all these articles. I wanted like a black and white answer. I wanted a buck. I was 12, 14. I wanted a buck so bad. So I was like writing notes. I was reading all these articles. I remember the biggest thing I've learned was, okay, they go to the field at night and they lay in the bed and they in a thicket and they'd find the heaviest trail. I got on the heaviest trail, man. I thought that was all you had to do because they were like, maybe just, and that wasn't it. I seen deer down in the woods. There's no trails down there. What are they doing down? They were down there eating acorns,
Yeah.
But it was like, I think I went backwards learning from people that their hunting situations were different than I grew up in southwestern Pennsylvania, and there was no big bucks. They were all just yearlings, 2-year-olds, when I was young. That was it. That was a big buck, 110-inch deer, 115-inch deer, but these deer were pressured to the point where they were killed off, and the ones that did survive were probably nocturnal. And I'm trying to learn from people that hunted in a different environment, and yeah, they might be good at that, but you can't use that guy's information. He almost got to describe, this is where I hunt, and this is how much pressure's here. This is public land, this is private land, this is farmland. Because a lot of them articles I read there, they didn't tell you where they were hunting. You know what I mean? It's like if you were
yeah, or if it was private land, public land.
Yeah.
Was it highly pressured? Was it not?
Yeah, there's all these variables that he and he's gonna like. I look at it like if you want to be a chef, say you like Chinese, you want to be Chinese food, you want to be a chef. You're not going to read about a chef that cooks Mexican food, because you're not going to learn how to cook Chinese. It's like an analogy is like, you're learning about, man, you're not learning the right, what you need to know. Like, if you wanted to, it's just, to me, it's like the article should describe where they're hunting, and then, or you want to learn from people that hunt them type of areas that are similar to yours, because I almost went backwards, I think, and I started going forward again when I started learning from the deer in my area instead of, I really don't read many articles now. I take tidbits from people that like Bo or other people that I know that hunt my area, and I say, oh, this happened to them, and I utilize that. But you could learn from everybody, whether they know a lot or not. But it's like, it has to be geared toward your environment. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just for people, humans, how they inhabit their land, like how we live and what we do. A guy over in China's daily life is way different than ours, and if you so it's like, it's a human, but his lifestyle is totally different. Where he eats, what's he do for a living, what's he do every day. So you have to go live in China if you want to kill. You know what I mean? To learn how
you want to kill that guy.
And that's the truth. Like, I go to Iowa, I learn there are different animals out there. You learn from them people. I go to West Virginia, Ohio. I hunted South Carolina this year, Montana. I hunted whitetails. It's like, everywhere you go, there's no black and white answer,
Yeah.
It's like you have to learn from that animal in his environment, or someone that knows and hunts the similar. That's my, like, if you can learn anything, is just like learn from either deer itself in that area that you're hunting, or people that know about that. You know what I mean? That's the biggest mistake I think I've made in my past, and now I learned from the deer itself, hunting hunts that I went on and places I hunted, and just experience being in the woods all the time and learning and asking yourself hundreds of questions. Why is this happening? Why is that? And putting hundreds of cameras out, looking at But I think, and then that's how I come to learn about late season hunting, because I'm hunting areas that are pressured through gun season, and it's. And then I get into late season, the pressure's gone, it's like, and they have to eat. Same thing as Iowa. Them deer out there in Iowa, I hunt public land, and I know some people that have some private land. I rarely hunt. I just like being out in the state land, and them deer out there are like, I call them addicts. They're addicted to corn. They're literally addicted to corn. I go out there after Christmas, if it's you got 5 days of sub-zero temperatures at 5-10 degrees. They're like zombies. They'll walk right to that corner bean field. They don't care. They don't look left, right. They just walk. They walk in a line. It's like, it's just like you see on TV. They sit in a cornfield and they wait to come out because it's like a heroin addict. They're addicted to that stuff, man. Like these deer here, around here, they can live off twigs and limbs, sticks and roots and shit. You know, them deer are just, like I said, it's like a Chinaman and you. There's a totally different lifestyle, you know. But the first time I went to Iowa, I sat on the edge of some state land, and my buddy had a big cornfield. He had a hunting shack. We sat there, you know. He got a Ranger. He drives right up to it. He gets up in his hunting shack. Here they come out of the woods like clockwork. I said, what time we going hunting? They ain't going to come out till 4. We get down there at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. They're just 130, 140-inch bucks just out like zombies. Eat that corn, eat that corn, eat. That's all they know. It's crazy. That's another reason out in Iowa I go out there. People say, oh, man, you got a bow hunt Iowa. I used to bow hunt Iowa, but I get a muzzleloader tag I got 2 years in a row now. You know what I mean? I shot that one this year, and there was a lot of places I was sick. I ended up shooting that deer. He's maybe 135, 140. He was a good deer. But I have a chance at 140, 150-inch deer every year, you know. But the deer out there, the hunting style out there is different than it is here. Down in West Virginia, it's different, you know. Where I live in southwest Pennsylvania is different. It's just...
Well, it's funny you were telling me about Iowa, and you're like, Bo, you got to put in for this muzzleloader tag. You're like, you can draw it way faster than you can an archery tag. You don't have to wait 4 or 5 years. You can, every 1-2 years, you get a tag, and he goes, the pressure's gone. You're like, I'm hunting state land, and I didn't have any pressure, and you killed a really good buck. And you're like, yeah, I would have actually probably passed them and kept hunting, but you were sick, and you're like, you're done. And I'm like, what do you mean you'd pass that buck? You're like, man, it's so.
I haven't shot 100. I hit 150 last year out there. I couldn't find it, but. They do some, and it's like hit or miss. It's like you go into some areas. I hunt sometimes 40-acre plots out there in Iowa, maybe 50, 60. And the one place I found no one was through there in gun season, muzzleloader. There was 8-10 bucks living on there, 140, 150-inch bucks. You know, but then again, if you get that 40-acre piece and it's pressured, they ain't going to be there. And another thing with Iowa, and it's true, and I learned it from my buddy out there, they don't have a lot of thick stuff, a lot of cover, a lot of open oaks, you know. They lived up in them hills during the day, and they come down to feed at night. But, you know, there's so many deer out there. They live differently than a deer here. Like out there, you almost got to be in a tree with your muzzleloader or whatever, because if you're on the ground, there's so many deer, they'll just pick you off. They'll see you. And that's what my buddy out there said. He said, you got a 40, 50-acre piece of timber, or maybe even 100. He said, you go into one end of the timber, they're already going out the other end, because that's how they survive in numbers, strength in numbers, and they live in that timber. You know, like deer here, I can go sit on the ground, you know, here with my muzzleloader bow late season. You're not going to have one deer bump another. It's not going to be a domino effect where they're going to disappear. You ain't going to see a deer. But it's fun out there. I go out there late season. I see deer all the time. I have chances at deer all the time. And I learned, you watch them on TV, and them guys are right. They know how to hunt them deer out there. And but they sit and wait for them to come out to the cornfield at night, especially when it's really cold and they have to eat. So I did that last year, and I was trying to get into a spot where I could set up by a cornfield and watch the timber. And this was, 10-degree weather, and I knew they were coming to that corn. So about 10, 12 doe come down out of the timber, and I tell you what, they were looking down, up in trees, left, right. They were sniffing because it was January, and people have been doing that, and that's how they hunt in Iowa, you know. So I'm like, I was sitting up in a tree 20 feet, my muzzleloader, I can't even move. They picked me off. One was downwind, upwind. There was like deer everywhere, you know. So that was gone. They're done. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do something different. I said, I'm going to go up in a timber an hour before daylight and catch them come up into us. No, you don't see them do that on TV.
Yeah, they don't hunt mornings.
No, nobody does that. And even my farmer buddy out there said, we don't hunt till 3 o'clock. We sleep all day or whatever. We don't go out in the woods. But when you're hunting that state land, you got to think outside the box. So I get up in the woods. I got up in it was like snow was crunchy as hell. I get up in the woods. I swear I blew every deer in the county out of that timber. Well, they weren't in a timber yet. They were out in that cornfield. So I get up in the woods. I sit on the ground. It was about 4 degrees. You know, no wind or nothing. half hour after daylight, here they come. They come up over that hill, and they were drunk off of corn all night. They walked right by me, never even looked at me, Bo. It was like 120-inch deers just walking. The night before, they were coming out to the cornfield. Boy, they had eyes behind their head, on top of their head. They're looking and smelling everywhere. But I ended up getting one last year like that. Well, I didn't find them. I hit a big one. Next day, I got out there. It was -7 degrees. I got up in the woods, and I was huddled up in a little ball. Here they come up over the hill, and I shot one,
Yeah.
But you just got to think outside the box. It's not always. I mean, you got to learn from that people. But public land, if you're going to hunt public land, you got to learn from someone that hunts public land. You know what I mean?
And think outside the box.
You got to think outside the box. Like Ohio's starting muzzleloaders starting Thursday. I'm going to go out to Ohio, and there's a piece of state land. Beautiful piece of state land, but it's pounded, man. There's some cornfields, nice timber. It's just beat. They hunt the hell out of it. So I snuck. I haven't been there in a few years. So this year I went and checked out this one ridge, and all this hillside was all white oaks. I went in there October 7th. Acorns on the ground like marbles. They're just laying there everywhere. But I was hesitant putting a camera out because there was a parking lot. There's a trail going back in there. I said, hell, I'm going to put a camera out. There's a little half-ass scrape. I put the camera out October 7th. I left. I'm leaving. I ain't even to the parking lot. There's guys passing me going into the woods. You know what I mean? I'm like, holy shit, my camera's gone. But if you're afraid to get your camera, I put them out, whatever they get taken, just go get another one. But then I come back in November. I got down there, November 13th, I went down there. It was about an hour before dark. I went in there an hour before dark purposely. I walked, the trail was beat down with people going back that ridge, I didn't see no sign, no rub, no nothing. And I hang a right, I get down on the hill, I go to get my camera. There's a tree stand right there, and I grab my camera about 50 yards from that stand. Ain't a rub, ain't a sign of life. I checked my camera. There was 140, 130s. There was one pushing 150. All 12 a.m., 1 a.m., 3 a.m., it's like, so I would never hunt there, you know what I mean? But I put that in the back of my mind. All them acorns are laying, and the leaves fell late this year. They're under there. They're hidden. It's like people put that electric fence around their food plot. They don't want the deer in there. Well, all these hunters are in there, and all them acorns are laying under them leaves. So I know them deer are going to be back in January to eat them acorns, because the guy's been keeping them all out of there. And you get the small, and a lot of them places I find just little doe tracks, because they're and I learned this years ago back in Southwest PA. We used to push this late archery muzzle. We used to push the same woods. And then before you know it, the deer, we were jumping 20 of them, then it was 10, then it was 8. Then before you know it, the only deer we were jumping, these small deer, fawns, these little, I call them diamonds, little small tracks. You just see little diamonds, and that's what you see on this public land, because that's all that's left in there. All the bigger ones, the old bucks, they don't want to be bothered. But the small ones that live there, they come into heat too. So, and it's usually later, December, January even, but that place out there in Ohio, I checked my camera that day, November, and that guy's stand was there, and all I did, people, and that's another thing, people are afraid to walk through the woods. I want to get right here. I'm going to hurry up. I don't want to spook nothing. Dude, these deer live with humans. You know what I mean? They like, especially a big buck, you jump him once, he's not going to move to the next county. He lives there with humans. He knows about hunters are in the woods, just because I go through the woods. Like, I want to see what's going on there, So I grabbed that camera that day, and the guy's stand was there. I just started hiking, walking fast, and I wanted to jump a deer, because that told me it was an hour before daylight, hour before dark. If I jumped a deer, that means there, and we just went through the first 2 weeks of November. That tells me guys hunt them same spots, same trees. They'll have a path to their stand. So if you can hike through the woods and you find a deer, there's a reason why that deer's there, because there's nobody hunting there. So I hike through the woods. I go fast. I damn near run through the woods. I just go. I'll cover. I want to find where the deer are. Even if it matters, I don't want to waste 4 or 5 days hunting a tree to learn there ain't no deer there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want to go, and if I jump one, it's not like that deer's like, oh, I'm going to move to the next county, because it's public land. You know what I mean? So,
and that's good advice there, as far as like when you're hunting different areas like that, you gotta put boots on the ground to find them. You can't go in and just start hunting. Say you have 5 days to hunt. if it takes you a day and a half of scouting till you find where they're at, that's better than you sitting there.
Yep. I've done it when I was younger. I'm going to hunt here. We don't want to be in here. We don't want to screw it up. I don't want to spook no deer. I got guys now. I can't believe you walk through the woods like it. I said, I want to know what's going on in the woods, even if it takes me a day to do it, because I've spent the 5-day hunts back 20 years ago, 18 years ago hunting, and then you're like, I was in a wrong spot. You get out, you walk, I should have been there. You see deer moving over there. I should have been over there. So just do it. Whether you got to hike through the woods like I said, but that's what I did. I hiked through the woods, and I got to a spot where I found some rub lines. I still had some butterflies in my stomach. I was scared. I was down there to hunt that November 13th through the 17th. I was down there to hunt, but I was like, these rubs still might be nocturnal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I didn't jump no deer. I just kind of stayed away, and I'd have to put about 5 cameras out to tell me, okay, and there's a chance that November 13th, 15th, 16th, a buck would come through there. You know what I mean? But I don't like not knowing. I would have rather have had cameras out, maybe, before I got there, way more cameras and tell me what's going on, because you got to know what's going on in the woods. It's the biggest thing. I don't just go to a spot and hope a deer comes by. No, usually I would drive to Illinois and put 5, 6, 7 cameras out and drive home, and I'd leave them cameras soak. I just let them soak when I get out. I don't want to know what's going on in the woods. You got a guy on your camera. But that's another biggest thing. People going to hunt that public land, they're afraid, they're going to screw it up. I don't want to go in there. I don't want to spook them deer. I'd rather just go through the woods and learn what's going on, pop a bunch of cameras out or whatever, but that place in Ohio, I'm anxious to get down there next week. I know that I pulled that camera. I don't have any in there, but their season runs till February 4th. I've shot them down there January 24th, 25th. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Was that a couple years ago that you were dragging them out and both antlers?
Yeah, both
off?
horns pulled off. But yeah, they're going to be in there, and I hope they get some snow in that. I'd love to go to. I'm going to go to muzzleloaders coming up, but I mean, it's spots like that. You can only, because everybody wants them first 2 weeks in November. Everybody wants that, you know what I mean? And a lot of, and then gun season comes in, and they just rape that land. But they're not stealing. They're stealing all the acorns. They're all laying. I know they're laying there, and white oaks are just, they're there. They're thick. So I know there's bucks going to be. I'm kind of look forward to getting down there and hunting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you just got to think outside the box. It's just the human pressure's the biggest thing you have to deal with, you know what I mean? But then again, the deer, if they're living there, they know humans exist and they live with them, so they're doing it, they're making it, they're getting by, so you spook one, you see a deer, it ain't the end of the world. Usually they do a circle anyways, they run, that's where they want to be. And another thing I used to do, I used to have my dog, I used to take him in the woods with me. The more noise you could make, here boy, talk to him. The deer was, okay, just a guy walking his dog. And we can hear him. He's over there. When everybody goes in there scouting, you do it. We do it now.
Yeah.
You should look at his spot. Look, you should look at that rub. You know what I mean? And then you start sneaking right, look at that, But that's a predator, and that's what they're mostly afraid of. You know what I mean? It's predators, but you go in there sneaking around.
Yeah, you're a nature walker out there with your dog. They're not like, no, he's no threat to us.
Yeah, that guy ain't going to bother us. And then you leave, and then they come back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what
And that's another thing you've said to me in the past too, is you're like, a deer's bedding, if they're bedding in an area, they're bedding there for a reason normally, and they know their escape routes, and they're going to come back there.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they're there for a reason. Just because you jump one time, that ain't gonna. That one year in Iowa, I found a spot. There was a fence. This buck was crossing a fence. He was about 160, 170 inch deer. I was bow hunting that year. It was in November. I found all his beds right there. He lived right there. I said, this buck lives here. I actually went in there and I jumped him. It was some reason, I don't know what I was doing, but I went in. It was like an hour before dark, and I just wanted to go scout this place. I was like zeroing in on this buck. He had rubs in different areas. I knew there was a big buck in the area. I just kept, singling out place that he might be. And I said, man, I bet he's in this tree line. It was thick, some monkey ball trees. So I went in there. I jumped him. I turned around. I ran. My car was about a half mile away. I got my stand, and I run back in there and put that stand up. You know what I mean? That was the best time. I said, because all his beds were right there. He had 4 or 5 beds. It was like November 9th. You know what I mean? And he was still, and that's another thing people do. I found a doe over the hill 2 days before. It was in full estrus. had 6 bucks behind her. He wasn't there. And that was his territory. That's where his rubs were. He don't want all that hassle. He don't want that. Sometimes he don't even want that first doe with 7 bucks running around. Because I found his rub over the hill, big ass rub. And I thought, oh man, this is where he's at. Next day, here come a doe. She's in heat. There's 6, 7 bucks there. Where's he at? He's still up on a hill. It's November 8th, 9th. He's still laying. He don't want that he don't want all that attention. He's going to get his when he wants his. You know, and that's the thing. He can pick and choose because he's in charge. I ain't fighting all them little fucking deer for that doe. You take him. I'll get mine. This old doe up here. She knows when she's ready. I know when he's ready. But anyways, I found where he was living. I found all his beds. Bumped him. It was like an hour before dark. I run back, got my stand. It was windy as shit. I got a lock on up in a tree right there where his beds are. I said, he's laying, and there was a CRP field and some bean fields. I know he was heading that way at night or whatever. So, and when I put that last peg on and put the stand on, I actually got in the stand and I looked. I seen a deer run on the other hill. It was a doe. Another deer behind him. It was that big buck. I know it was. They stood there and watched me. It was windy as shit. They watched me get up in that tree. I come back the next morning, southwest wind. I was on a downwind side of his beds and where he jumped that fence. And I sat there and I knew he was bedding there. I knew he wasn't after them does yet because it's not what he did. So next morning I said, he's going to jump his fence, come out. I'm going to shoot him right here, because it was thick. That's where he bedded and hung out. Well, what happened was he watched me get in that stand and the wind was blowing from the trail to me, and he come in the woods further away from my tree because he seen me put that stand up. That's another thing. That's why I like climbers. Things are always changing in the woods. You got to move. You got to be mobile. Such shit's happening here today, but tomorrow it's over here. It's over there. Things are always changing. So that deer come in the woods maybe on the next trail up. He was about 90 yards away, but I could smell him. The wind blew right over his tarsal glands, hit me right in the nose. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. That's when they come in out and field us. That buck's, that was that deer yesterday up on that hill with that doe. He watched me. He's not coming in these woods. Near this stand, even though this is where he jumps and he lays. So I sat there and I'm like, don't move, just be quiet, be patient, stay there. I was like, I'm moving over there. So I got down at 9 o'clock and I went that way about 70 yards and I seen the trail that he came in on out of that CRP. I got up in a tree and, that's another thing. He didn't leave that area. He's there for a reason. Even though this guy's sitting in a tree right here, he's still living here. My buddy did that one time in Illinois. A buck seen him up in a tree. He kept hunting that tree. Well, here come 2 days later. The buck was chasing these 2 doe. The doe come right under the tree. That buck made a half moon. He went all the way around the tree and then back on the doe and kept chasing him. So I remembered that. So I got down. I went over to where that buck, I seen that next trail where he came in the woods. I got up in a monkey ball tree. I sat there about 11 o'clock. And right before dark, right down in front of me, there's about a 150-inch 8-point. I seen him a couple of days early, but that wasn't the one I was after. I was after this bigger one. That 150-inch 8-point stood, near that CRP, and I looked to my left, and I hear that shh, shh, shh. I said, oh, here comes that. And that's what he did. He used that next trail because he seen me put that tree stand up in that tree the day before, so he just moved down another 50 yards, 70 yards. He's doing the same thing. And he come out, and I had one hole at 20 yards. I couldn't get it on him, and he run that 8-point out. And I took a shot at him. I hit a limb, hit him on a leg. It wasn't even a vital shot, but they'll live. Like you're up in a tree, he's still living there, even though I'm hunting that tree right up there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He ain't gonna go near there. But he's bet. It's like you find them beds, he's here for a reason, man. And usually when you find a place like that, the day goes so fast because he's living there for a reason, you know what I mean? But like you said, up in this area, a lot of these deer don't even have a core or a bedding area. They just roam. But if you got some more topography or like a farm country and bedding, there are them spots. I mean,
and it all just comes down to from
individuals or...
Yeah,
exactly.
And each area just adapting to it and trying to learn what they're doing. And like you said, if it takes a few days of scouting, even if you only have 5 days to hunt, it takes 2 days to scout. Those 3 days you're going to get to hunt, you're going to be in a way better position than you were if you sat in a tree for all 5 days.
Yeah, and I'm impatient. I hate sitting in a tree.
Yeah.
So I make sure I'm in the right spot, did all my scouting, and know what the variable hunting, which is hunting pressure. You don't know what that is. Learn all that, and then, okay, I'm in the right spot. And then there's times I've been in a tree to where I knew so much that I was in the right spot the time, and I knew I was going to kill a deer, and I killed a deer because it was just like everything was perfect. You know what I mean? It's rare to have that happen, but it can come to that to where you're just like so sure of yourself, you know, because everything just kind of all the stars line up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you got to know, I hate going to, that's why I hate going to a new public land and I'm going to hunt here. I can't. I have to know what's going on. That's why I said I just like studying these animals and learning. And I love hunting individuals. Like at one in Iowa that year, it was a CWD or EHD or whatever it was. It was killing all them deer, and it was hard to even find a 150-inch. I lived out there. People said, you going to Iowa hunting? I said, when you coming back? I said, when I shoot my deer. They're like, what? I was out there about 3 months hunting, you know, but I found that deer, and that's the animal I wanted. You know, I seen the 100. My buddy come out, Chris came out. I said, there's a 145-inch 10 and a 150-inch 8 in this spot. I said, go down there and hunt. I said, go down there. I said, go shoot them. You know, that's not what I'm after. And he got the 10. He was 145. I said, yeah, that's the ones I seen the other day. You know what I mean? But I like hunting that individual. And up here, I like, because the personalities, and people say that a buck moves out of an area, another one moves in, which is true. But I'm starting to find out sometimes it doesn't happen, or sometimes another buck will utilize that area how he wants to use it, how he sees the terrain and how he sees life. You know, it's like there might be 3 routes to get to work in the morning. You know, you go this way to get to work, and then maybe another day you go this way, or another person goes this route. This is how, you know what I mean? Might go down the interstate, a guy might take the back road, you know?
Yeah.
And that's how you use your habitat and your terrain. You know what I mean?
And it's
everybody's
funny,
different.
That, yeah, again, another thing that I've learned from you, and your hunting style is funny because we always joke back and forth. You're like, you know, I'm after, you know, this deer, and you're sending me pictures of these deer you're passing and stuff. I said, John, those are beautiful deer, and you go, yeah, and you know, and if I would shoot it or something, you wouldn't be like, oh, that's a small deer or anything. You'd be just as happy. But you're hunting a certain experience, and you've hunted for a long time now, and you were telling me, you're like, I don't even know if I like killing that much. I just like trying to figure out these deer, and I'm trying to hunt next level deer, you know.
Yeah, I want to
that
find
people say don't exist, except for we were joking around. You're like, yeah, I am figuring out though that sometimes when you have expectations, there has to be those deer actually living there.
Yeah, I know.
You know?
But that is another big thing. You're going to make sure. But if I know that big 150, 170, whatever is there, I can't take a smaller one. This year, I had a 7-point on my camera up in this area. He's 135-inch big, and man, I could have smoked his ass. But I'm like, man, there's a chance. The buck I'm talking about, not the 7-point, but the one I'm after, I don't even have a picture of him this year. I don't know if he exists. But chances are up here he does. But last year, he was about 170-inch, you know. And like that's the one I want. In like my buddies back home, they're not in. Man, were you going after that unicorn again, John? You know what I mean? Go sit in the woods and
you're big on doing that. You're hunting, you know, specific deer or whatever, and I just always laugh when you're like, oh, I'm hunting, you know, this deer. And I'm like, John, you know, the expectations around here, and when most people, I hear it a lot. I'm talking to different people. They're like, oh, I passed on some 130s this year, and I don't want to say I'm rolling my eyes and, you know, not in front of them, but like thinking like, okay, yeah, you passed on that kind of good deer. But I know you, and also I've seen your walls of big deer that you've killed. So I know you're being serious about it when you're saying, yeah, this is the caliber of deer I want. And you went a couple of years there without filling a tag.
Yeah,
you're like,
definitely.
You're like, I don't care. Nothing got me to the point where I wanted to pull the trigger on it. Uh-huh. You know, I had fun seeing those deer and everything else, but you're like, I'm hunting something that's challenging myself to the point of.
That's what I remember back to when I was 12. For me to even get a buck was like I thought it was impossible because I missed some and I had a buck fever and I didn't know a lot and I didn't have a lot of place to hunt, and like my dad didn't really hunt, and I was so fascinated, but I didn't know anything, and I'm trying to get back to that, to where it's like the deer I want, when I do get them, it's going to be above and beyond. You know what I mean? Like, if I lived in Iowa and I shot 145, 150-inch deer every year, it'd be fun. I'd enjoy it, but if you only get one once a year or every 3 years and it's so rare, it's like I'm trying to get back to when I was that kid. And, I thought even getting a deer was impossible with my bow or my gun because I sucked that bad and I messed up so many. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm getting back to that. I want that challenge. I want that again. So when I get them, it's like you just scream. You're like, oh man, you get that, and it makes it as a mental game too. Because if you're hunting a deer that you only might have a shot at every 3-4 years, mentally you can't fuck up because you got that one chance. It's how tough are, and it's a big mental game just in general.
Yeah, and like you said, it's all in your own personal preference. Like, you're not going to frown on someone for shooting a 6-point because that's may get them just excited.
That's right.
But you're at a point in your life and your hunting career that you're like, I want something that's going to completely get me excited. I want this next level.
When you get it and everybody looks at it like, does that even exist? Holy mackerel, I never seen it. A lot of deer I shoot now, and people like back home, they don't see. Oh, they look at my house like, I never seen nothing. But it's if you're in the hunting industry, it's different than that. But a lot of them are public land. But like Bo's, like you were saying, Bo, about hunting a deer that I might never get, like the deer you were hunting, Hercules. A lot of times I said, Bo, you know the most about that deer, but chances are, if he's at that age class.
Yeah, and I got that one shot at him, and I didn't capitalize, and that was,
that was your chance. But even after that, that's a deer that's, you're hunting a deer 7 years old, right? 8, 6, and it's like, you don't make mistakes.
He was either 7, he would have been 8 this year if he made it, which I'm now starting to think that he died somehow. But I don't think a hunter got him, or you would have heard about him. He was well over 170 inches. That's not normal.
No, they get to that age. It's just like, and it is a different animal. People, hunting a yearling or a fawn or a doe or a 2-year-old is different. They get to that age, and it's just like anything in general life. You learn to take shortcuts and live and survive and do things to where you were younger. You weren't as efficient, and it just comes with age and knowledge. And I do believe, and here's another thing I tell people, people say, you take one, it's 130, 140, it's still a 6-5-year-old deer, it's still a trophy. I didn't say it wasn't, but I tell people, so they look at me like I'm retarded, but when that fucker has a 170-inch rack on his head and his points are 12 inches tall, he's 22 inches inside, there ain't many deer in the woods like that, and he walks up to another deer, and that other deer looks at him like he's seen a ghost because that other deer ain't never seen nothing like that. So he gets it. I mean, they're just like human. They're just, they get the same reaction. Like, if you ain't never seen a good looking woman and you seen this beautiful woman, you're like, holy shit, look at that. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, so she knows the reaction and she gets that. And she's like, wow, there must be not a lot of these around here. You're the only one around.
Yeah.
He got that on his head and he's walking around with this big rack on his head. He knows how, like a lot of the bigger bucks, they get away. Yeah, they're smarter and all, but I've seen 130, 140s, old bucks get killed, but these big ones, they actually have to hide what they got on their head. And a lot of things I learned is from tracking deer. Like I said, I tracked them 2 bucks, and I think one was the older one, the bigger track. I don't think his rack was as big as the other one, and how he had to maneuver, and he had that rack on his head. He had to go under stuff, and it's like, I got to hide this abortion here on top of my head. It's like sitting up here. Ain't no other deer got this, you know what I mean? It's like when you go down a road, you ever go down a road, your buddies go down the road, and you look and you see a big buck along the road. You're like, oh, back up, stop. And that deer can see the reaction you give him. He ain't no dummy. You know what I mean? And it's stuff like that, experiences he has as a deer. It's like, these fuckers ain't never seen nothing like this. I got to hide my ass. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's stuff. It's like how I look at. Like I said, that's going back to when I was a kid. I read all these magazines, but it wasn't for what I was doing. So I think most of the time I learned from my own experiences, and I like to use analogies to be like, okay, let other people understand. Like this is how it is. You know what I mean? And putting them cameras are a huge thing. I rely a lot on them, but lately I've been putting 2 or 3 out in one area every 50 yards or something, you know what I mean? Just because of the fact that I've had camera right here, shooting this way, and you could see 20 feet, 45-degree angle, and you got to, it ain't no deer, I ain't nothing here. Then you grab your other camera, you got $5 on it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's like good and bad, but I think if you got enough of them out there, it's going to be good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are worried about getting their cameras stolen. So I always take any more. I put them around my waist, 3 or 4 cameras, and I take a climbing stick. And I usually put them about maybe for scrape 20, 30 feet or trail rubs 20, 30 feet. I keep them away, and I get up in a tree, and I got all different color cameras, dark, light, whatever tree fits. And I put that up there, about 15 feet, and rarely.
I love looking at your trail camera pictures when you put them on the computer because I'm like, how high were you in this?
Yeah,
tree
you
or
got
whatever it is. You're like, oh, I climbed up the limbs and hung this down, and and you have it's crazy to see that sometimes, and it all, like you said, depends on the area.
And
but
it's what are you how bad do you want it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, and it's to each their own. It's what I want to do, or I'll put them low on it, like a foot off the ground, but on a steep hillside. I had one down Ohio. I went down there, another spot down there. I got a guy's foot, because he stood right in front of my camera, but he never seen it because it was a steep hillside, and I was shooting my camera downhill, but it was only a foot up on a tree, and I put like limbs and bark and shit around there and hit it, but I got a guy's foot. But if I had it 4 feet off the ground, he might have taken it or whatever. You know what I mean? But you got to think outside the box and think. But yeah, the biggest thing, is to learn from the animal you're hunting in that area that he inhibits.
Yeah, it's funny. So, like, to backtrack a little bit, how long have I known you now? Has it been about 3 years?
Probably too long, Bo. Too long.
Yeah, I know. I'm about ready to end this whole.
I've probably 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah, and
since
I think did I find it on Instagram or something? That's what it was at first. I don't know how I found you or you found me, whatever it was you had a picture when you had your old Jeep Cherokee and you had all these sheds laying on the thing, like northern Pennsylvania. I'm like, who's this asshole that's up here doing this, And I don't remember, again, if I messaged you or you messaged me, and we just started talking. Found out you were hunting like right next to where I was, same area, and then, you're like, hey, I'm coming up this weekend, the summer, check cameras, you want to meet up? So I was out checking cameras, so were you. We met up on a dirt road out in the woods and just started talking and hung out from there. And then after that, I went down to your house, well, a few times now, but the first time I walked in, they come upstairs, check out some of my deer on the wall. I walked upstairs, and you would have thought you would have thought you were in Mark Drury's house or something and you're like, oh, these are all public land bucks. And I'm like, really? Like, you had one from Illinois. I don't know, what is he, like 18 points or something?
I was one I had around my area back home.
Oh, okay. That's what it was.
But I've shot some around southwest Pennsylvania. I've shot one. I remember they extended a muzzleloader till January 25th, and I was hunting this one deer. And I was in a hard hunted area, you know what I mean? I was in a tree. Well, I shot him with a bow. January 24th, I had a shed from him. He was 100, 155. And you're talking about an area that only has 2 to 3 year olds. 110, 120 is a huge buck, And I remember I shot at that right before dark. And I sent pictures to people, I didn't have no Instagram. I sent them people. They didn't believe me. One buddy sent it to his, was down a bar and showed him, that's from Ohio. There's no deer around here like that.
Yeah.
But that's people's mentality. But there are some down at just anywhere you can find a good. Some of them get away, you know what I mean? But they're doing something right, and you got to learn that animal, you know what I mean? But like that time, like you said, I had all them sheds on a hood. I started shed hunting up here 6-7 years ago, and nobody shed hunted up here. I run into some guys up on a road where I hunt, and they hunt from they're locals, and they hunt this area. And I was in a woods shed hunting, and I run into them, and they end up coming out to my vehicle, and they seen all them horns in the back. Where'd you get them? Where you get them at? So I found them in Ohio. I didn't tell them, but then I found a lot of old horns. People weren't shed hunting now. It's a craze, man.
It's
There's
popular,
guys up here pounding these woods and
with dogs and everything.
Dogs, and I go in there, and that's why a lot of times anymore I just like having them cameras out, 10, 15 cameras or something, just kind of watching through after Christmas through spring just to see what's there, because chances are if I get time to come up here, chances are they already went through that area. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is what it is. It's you can't be a pessimist. You can't. Oh God, a lot of you goes, oh guys in my spot. I said, well, go find another spot. You got to have a couple spots on hand. You know, if there's someone there. And I'm like, well, I usually know more about that deer than anybody in that spot, and I use them people to my advantage. I told Dave, I said, hey. He ends up here. I said, he's like, oh, guy in my spot. I said, who cares? Go to another spot or use him to your advantage. He's here. Well, then don't go there because chances are, you know, he's hunting the same tree and he's going to keep hitting that spot. But like I said, that's why I don't use a lot of climbers. I'm mobile. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or
I mean, I don't use a lot of lock-ons. Just kind of always moving. You never know. If things are always, I like sitting and then I like get down and pussyfoot around a little bit, you know, and get back up in a tree, you know, because it's always changing in the deer woods. What's going on, you know? You got to kind of try to be. I've watched a lot of hunting videos where a guy just sat in the same tree for days or years. Like, dude, move. You know what I mean?
Well, and. Because you were telling me about, you know, using your climber and stuff, and I use climbers, and I use a lock on that's really mobile, one that's, you know, lightweight sticks, and I'm able to move. So it's similar setups. But your lone wolf, you were repairing it last year. Something happened. You have a lone wolf with a hand climber.
Yeah,
and you've had that for how many years now? That was before most people knew about lone wolf. You had one and have been using it religiously. You were telling me, you're like, invest in a good stand like this because it lasts you and it's light and easy.
I had the one year for about 8-10 years, and I was about 2 years ago. I was going up and the seat broke on me. I said, man, maybe it's time to buy a new tree stand. You know, so the bolts broke because I just should have changed all the hardware, but I bought a new one. That's what I use at Lone Wolf. But like out in Iowa, I take a lot of lock-ons.
I remember you were like, but was there any place around here to buy lone wolf stands? I was like, no.
That's right, yeah.
No, there's not.
Yeah.
You're like, I need one like now.
Yeah. I mean, but them lock-ons are good, but it seems like you get them in a spot and then I'm moving them. I'm moving them, and it's just, but out in Iowa, I use them, the tree, a lot of white oaks, not a lot of straight trees, you know, but.
So the setup I have, I don't remember if I've ever showed you, but I have a Hawk one, and Lone Wolf makes similar setups, but it's all aluminum, so it's super lightweight. That, and I used to only carry 3 sticks, now I carry 4, and I can get like 16, 18 feet with that. Sometimes a little higher, sometimes a little lower, depending on the setup. But I've just practiced with it so much that I have a system. I can get up and down a tree just as fast as I can with a climber with that, because I've just, you know, it's all about what you use and how you. But before, I just thought with lock-ons, it was just, you had the steel ones that clipped in, the sticks that weighed 20 pounds themselves and everything else, and I've kind of modified that to be able to. And the only reason why I prefer them over climbers is I can get in some weird trees. Yep. Sometimes I'm only hunting. People laugh at me. I'm only hunting 8-10 feet off the ground.
Yeah,
and it all depends on the setup.
You're right.
And if I go into the woods, I want to be able to pick the tree that I want to. I want to pick the spot and be able to hunt the spot,
find the right tree.
And
according
be able
to your spot,
and do that and be able to move and like you said, sometimes I'll be up in a tree and I realize, all right, I saw 5 deer moving down there just out of range. I'm probably going to move my stand and not just, I hope they come by me next time.
Exactly. It's kind of, you get lazy,
It's easy to get lazy. You're hunting for a couple weeks and stuff.
Yeah, and you know, tired. You're kind of grilled to be like, be quiet, just stay there, be quiet. You know, when you're a kid out, and you just stay there, be quiet, stay at the tree. And that's what I said. There's times I moved, like last year at that big 8-point and 150 incher hunting. I moved probably 6 times. And honestly, I did a little, like when I found him when he was bedding in that thick, that 20-year-old clear cut or whatever. I should have did a little more scouting, but I hurried up and got a tree. I'm get up a tree, because it's just in your mentality. Oh man! But I did. I moved a few more times and I seen them, But then after the season, I found the exact spot I should have been in, but it was still green when I found that spot, and there wasn't a lot of, by the end of the season. So I went back here this year, and I think he made it through. I went back here this year. That's another thing. I'm learning a lot of these deer up in this area. I don't know if it's a pecking order or what it is, because all the area is pretty much the same as far as food. Like that buck, I had him on camera second to the last day of rifle, and I'm saying he made it through rifle season. And I said, next year he's in. I'll find. I know where to get him. He's gonna. He moved. he's not there. And I heard, got wind of another guy got him on camera somewhere, but not that spot. Why? And last year when I was there, his rubs were on the top of that hill in that 20-year-old clear cut everywhere, beds everywhere, and he had rubs from the year before. I said, so I didn't get him last year, seen him 3 times, made it through rifle. I said, oh, it's a no-brainer. I can kill him next year, Yeah. He wasn't there. 3 bucks up here from last year that I was like 90% sure it made it through gun season, and I knew these deer. I had enough years with them and knew the land and knew where they hung out. And then this year, it's just, I didn't have none of them on camera. That 8-point, that big 12, and another 10. I was like, where'd they go? You know what I mean? And I'm pretty sure they made it through, and it's just like.
So when you're going in to find, some of these spots, like, are you looking at maps ahead of time, or are you just, kind of walking through the woods, or how you kind of, because there's a lot of woods to walk in.
I start off, and it's the deer they can't just have. They need food, cover. That's the biggest thing. They like not just one. They don't want just one 500-acre clear cut. They want some topography, water, a little bit. You kind of find a little bit of everything. Like you look at them aerial photos, Google or whatever, Onyx, and you see maybe a 20-year-old clear cut, maybe a fresh one like right up the road, maybe a hillside, a mature forest. Like every 7-8 years. That's the type of, your forest should be 7-8 years difference when you're managing land, they say, but like have a young forest, just clear cut, maybe a little bit old. So like they like a little bit of everything.
And they love edges too.
On the edge of them different, like maybe a mature woods, but I look when it has maybe a little bit, but then again up here you can get into some big open woods that it's open enough, and a lot of these deer eat blackberry briars, and you can't see that. They're in the clear cuts, but you get into these big open cherries, these big nice hollows, it might be covered with ferns and blackberries, briars, and
and you can't tell that from
you can't tell that. So yeah, you got to. But if you can find like a clear cut and then find where something it's a little harder to access.
Yeah.
Keep some of the people away. That always helps.
Yeah, I remember a couple years ago you were telling me about a spot. You're like, it's not that far in, but I had to bring waders in or whatever to get across the creek.
Yeah.
You're like, just by that barrier keeps people out.
That's anything if it's tough to get to, that's going to help. A long walk, I ain't afraid to walk, and it's tough hunting public land. Like I said, it's more challenging, like, than out maybe in the Midwest, hunting in blinds, box blinds. I mean, we're going back in the woods a half mile. You're going to sweat. The wind up here does what it wants, and it's just difficult. It's a challenge, but if you can basically get your boots on the ground. But like I said, and another thing, but people don't realize, Pennsylvania, back in the 20s, 30s, back in the 1900s, this land was raped. They cut all the trees, and then the forest started growing, and the deer population started growing. You got to the 70s, 80s, the population was out of control. There was a lot of deer, and nobody knew what the potential of the deer in Pennsylvania as far as rack could be, because when I was, in back in the 90s, when I started coming up here, late 80s, 90s, there was everybody goes up north. The deer ain't big up there, but there's a lot of deer. See a lot of deer. Well, they ate themselves out of a house and home after the populations got so big. You see the browse line through the woods 4 or 5 feet off the ground. So then the deer killed themselves. People think game wardens put all this coyotes and killed them, but they died off, and then they grew back, and the numbers were real low, and they started gradually growing back, and now we're getting some big deer up here, and the food is here. And I tell people, I said, hey, you walk through the woods up here, you see carpet pine, you see blackberry briars, there's in the winter, wild strawberries on the ground crawling everywhere, ferns, they eat the ferns. To me, there's half a dozen things that are growing in the winter that the deer eat. You go out to Ohio, you go out to Illinois, that timber, that doesn't have that. They're all oak, just open, like down Ohio where I hunt down near the Ohio River. Them big rugged landscape there is just, there's not much. If there's no acorns in them woods, there ain't nothing for them to eat. There's nothing. But that's what I mean. Like you come up here, I'm like, look at all the food that's here. Look at these deer in the last 5 years. They're 250-pound deer. These big fat deer. Big body. I said, Pennsylvania's going to grow some big deer because they never. it wasn't known as a big because
and
of what happened in the
if
past.
you look at it just from a standpoint of oaks or whatever, or cornfields or ag or anything, you're like, oh, there's not that much food here. But in reality, there's more food than anywhere.
There's more, yeah.
It's just not concentrated to one area. But if you find things like, say, clear cuts or, a lot, that creates a lot of food and cover. And then depending on the age of the clear cut, and then, like you said, briar bushes, if cherry trees, if they have black cherries on them, that's another food source. And so it's to kind of circle back around to your scouting, you're kind of picking these areas that have different, either terrain or different breakup.
Variety of
stuff.
Yeah.
And then you're going to put boots on the ground. And then once you get in there, now you're figuring out, okay, well, this has briars. I'm going to take a mental note of this. Or this has this. And just kind of seeing how the deer are using it, and like you said, each area is just different.
And there's not a lot of
adapting.
In this area, funnels, and I know a lot of people. Oh, look at these two pieces of timber. This creates a funnel, which is nice. But up here, there's not too many funnels. Like you like to hunt creek bottoms. They do travel to creek bottoms. That's just a general. Ditches, drainage ditches. But a lot of time, people like if you could hunt, bow hunt in Pennsylvania up till another week up to the 20th, up to Thanksgiving, you'd kill a lot more bucks, and then them creek bottoms, and then the deer will travel more to find them other does. But the deer ain't travel. I mean, they do the last couple of days, but it's just.
And speaking specifically again on Pennsylvania, I like that we don't have a super high deer population because those bucks are traveling looking for those.
You're right. Yep.
And they have more food because the forest is so healthy.
Oh,
because
man.
of the
It's
lower
unreal.
deer populations. Yep. I mean, I could go for days on this, but Penn State, a lot smarter people than I have professors have done studies on this, and actually listened to it on a podcast Wired to Hunt did with a guy from Penn State, and he was talking about how the forests in Pennsylvania are as healthy as they've ever been.
Yeah,
that's why we're seeing these older deer. That's why we're seeing these big deer, because they got all this food, and there's not as much competition for the food because there's not giant deer populations. So it is a struggle for, say, like getting kids and stuff involved because they're not seeing as many deer. It's hard to, get them interested. But for us that are trying to kill these, bigger deer, older deer, it's a good situation right now. But again, not to put it lightly and act like you can just come up here and kill some really big deer. It's still extremely tough.
It's very tough. It's probably, these big woods are tough, man. Any state that you got a big woods and there ain't no concentration of food to funnel the deer like out west.
Yeah.
There's a lot of states I haven't hunted that are, but you can use, bits and pieces from places you learn and put it all together. But the population here is low, but like I said, the food is super abundant, and it took that when a plant is stressed out, it doesn't, when it's ate down to a nub for so many years, 10, 20 years, then say the deer die off, that plant, it's just like animals, humans, all get stressed. It's not like, next year it's just going to be this bountiful variety of growth. It takes years for that plant to recover from that stress, that overbrowsing for so many years. It took 20 years. Now I remember when I was coming up here as a kid, I'd see all the variety of plant life at home, Southwest Pennsylvania. And I come up here and there was none. But now I'm starting to see a match. How there's a lot of variety, and that's what a deer, they're browsers, not grazers, really. They're made to browse and eat this, not corn and that. I mean, they're adaptable and they can live anywhere, but that's what I said, the potential of these deer in Pennsylvania, you don't know how big they're going to get, honestly.
It's funny, like, when you spend as much time in the woods as we do, like, watching deer and what they do, like, I've watched does come through just browsing on sticks that are hanging off trees.
Eaters.
You're like, what do you mean? Like, that's what you're going to choose to eat, but they'll eat whatever, it's pretty, it's interesting, I guess, to see that. And
they're hardy, they can, I know that one, probably about 5 years ago, had a 3 foot of snow for a long time up here. And they just ate sticks. Like, you go down, they just eat trees. And I found a lot of dead fawns, full belly, but they just starved. There wasn't enough nutrition in them. But a lot of these big bucks, like I said, they're not so much worried about. It's more survival and being strongest and fittest and being not about getting 5 does or the first doe. And, it's just, It's a different, you can go a whole different conversation about mature deer versus young deer and what the, older bucks compared to younger deer and how it's just a different animal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to comment on, because I feel like you'll hear questions about it, or I'll get questions about it, is with you. You're talking about you're like, oh, when I went to Iowa back in the day, I'd just go until I killed a deer. Well, you have built your whole life basically around deer hunting, where you've started your own business. You have an excavation business in the Pittsburgh area, and when it's not hunting, you told me before, and I laugh about this, and I'm kind of getting this way. You're like, I'm either in work mode or I'm in hunt mode.
Yeah.
So when it's not hunting season, you're working 7 days a week. You're working long days to do this, and then when it's time to hunt, you're like, I'm taking off, and this is what I'm doing. I'm in hunt mode. Because we were joking. I said, you got to quit being so busy at work, because the last couple of years,
I've been really busy.
All through the rut.
Yep.
And you're like, Bo, I can't just go hunt for 2 days. I need to fully
it's a lifestyle.
Change my brain over to hunt mode and get into it. And it's funny but it's inspired me. I was like, man, I wish they would have taught me that in school. As far as building your life around it, you've made that. You don't have a typical job with it, which is you're not doing a 9 to 5. You're working whatever you need to, and then when you have your work done for the year and you've made the money you need to survive,
that's it.
Then
do what you want. Yeah,
you do what you want.
Yeah, the first year I went to Iowa, the last 3 years. This is my 4th year. I started an excavation business, but I did work for another guy before that, and I said, hey, come October, I'm gone. I can't. I remember I was working somewhere. I was putting water line in, and I looked over in this guy's yard. There's these big rubs, and my crew was working. I jumped off the machine. I run down in the woods, and I come out of the woods, and the guy's like, where were you? I said, man, did you see that rub? I was down there just walking around, and that guy's checking it out. And I think the next day, that was probably 7, 8 years. The next day, I had an Iowa tag that year. Next day, I jumped in my Jeep, and I was gone. I was in Iowa the next day. I got to go. I got an Iowa tag. I'm out of here. But I went to Iowa. People were like, oh, yeah, you going to Iowa? How long? I said, I don't know, till I shoot my deer. Well, you going for a week? And I said, no, till I shoot my deer. I was living out of my Jeep on the state land, you know what I mean? The game warden, I'd run into the gates. I said, I'm just going to pull in this parking lot and sleep. I said, I'm in the woods all day anyway. Whether I went out maybe the second, third week of October, and back then I didn't have Onyx, I didn't have Google. I had a flip phone, and I had maps and notebooks. You know what I mean? I studied maps, and I just got my boots on the ground. They had that year they had CWD was a problem, but I finally that's that one year I found that 170.
Yeah,
and I had 4 encounters with that deer down in that bottom. I hit him on a leg, and I seen him another time. I was coming down out of my tree. He was watching me. And another time, I shot at him another time, right on the edge of a thicket. He was with a doe. It was like until November 10th, he was still in his, crepuscular, going out before dark, you know what I mean? And like I said, down the road, these bucks are all crazy running. And I told another thing, a lot of public land, a lot of these people go to Iowa, and the first 2 weeks of November are awesome, but I've killed them at the end of November, you know what I mean, with a bow, because they pound them woods, You might be able to find a spot nobody's hunting, but then everybody goes home for the holidays, and I was out there. Everybody went home for the holidays, and then, end of November, everybody's waiting for shot. Nobody's bow on that public land. Them bucks are still running. That's another thing. The peak times that everybody goes. That's not there's so many deer. The deer population's healthy out in Iowa. There's does everywhere, and they don't breed them all in the first 2 weeks. They're breeding through November. I'd see them all the way in December. Chasing does and January even. But you have to scout them areas and make sure nobody's hunting there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then have to have the time to hunt it.
You got to have that's what I said. I said, I'm going to Iowa. I was staying in my Jeep, and then I just living in my Jeep, And then, I met up with a farmer, and I got to know him, and I ended up living with him. I was living out there with the farmer, and he was combining corn, and he needed someone to drive the semi to haul grain to the. I said, I'll drive it. I don't care. He said, I said, I got truck driver license. I'll drive it. So my buddies are calling me. How's it going? I said, I'm hauling corn. I got to pay for my stay here,
Yeah, that was one of the funniest part. You're like, yeah, I was staying in my Jeep, and this guy's like, "What are you doing?" You know, and you got to know
him
this
and his wife.
farmer.
They hunt and live right by public land. They see hunters, like they know how big hunting is. And I was there myself. Where are you staying? Just sleeping in my Jeep. And the wife's like, "You can't be sleeping. We got an extra room." If you ever and then I didn't stay there, and then I end up stopping back and talking to him and I got a good relation with him. But
yeah, now you go out. I mean, you've spent, since I've known you, you go out there every year around Christmas time and
stay there, and I hunt all that state land, or I can hunt their land. They don't have a lot of timber, but it's just.
And I remember when you were telling me, you're like, just this past week or whatever, you were out there. You're like, yeah, I cut firewood for him and did whatever he needs done. I help out around there, and that's neat, that you were able to do that. But when I first met you, and I was like, this guy's freaking crazy. He just drives all over the country, lives out of his Jeep, and does whatever.
Yeah, and that was before I started my business. I thought I was worse then, because I remember I was driving to Iowa. I was out there, living out there, and then I had this big buck in Pennsylvania, the one near my house. It was 156 inch. I said to them people in Iowa, I'm going to drive back and hunt a couple days, and I'll be back. I drove all the way home. I rifle hunted the last couple of days of PA after that one down in southwest PA where I live. Drove all the way home, hunted there for a couple of days. And I drove back out to Iowa, and I hunted there for a little bit. I said, well, I'm going to go back to PA. Muzzleloader season started. I drive all the way back to muzzleloader hunting that deer, But it would be nothing. I said, or I would be like, I'd always watch the weather, and I'd be, man, I need to be in Ohio. I'd leave. At one time, I left Montana. I was hunting whitetails, Swan Valley. I was rifle. I said, man, I think I'm going to head down to Ohio. And I drove 28 hours,
Cold front's coming. I gotta go.
The snow melted there. I was out there tracking deer. That's a whole nother subject I can get on. A buddy of mine tracks him deer out in Montana, up in Maine, and that. And he's like premier. Like he's into that. I learned a lot from him. Like I told you. I said, go out in the winter, just track him deer. You're going to learn so much. The one I shot this year up here rifle hunting, I just told you, I started tracking a deer the second day of gun season. I picked up a track, and I could tell it was a mature deer, and he went up in this hemlocks and beech brush, and he was. I didn't tell you this. He was looking for a certain tree, a certain hemlock, and a certain flat spot. He was looking. I told you he would go up across the creek, up in these hemlocks. He'd stand. You could see stand on his hemlocks, look around, look to the left, and he walked to the right 50 yards, got in some more hemlocks, and he come down the hill. It was almost he was looking for something, like he misplaced something. You know what I mean? And then when I jumped him, I took a picture where he jumped out of. It was a typical, it was a big buck bed. He had a big oak tree behind him and some beech brush, big flat spot. And right before I jumped him, I knew I was going to jump. I said, this deer's, he's looking for he wasn't sure exactly where this spot was. He was just walking around he found that spot, and that's where he wanted a bed for the day. Because, them big bucks, you find a big buck bed. It's typical saying this is a big buck bed. You could just tell it has all the same features. It has a nice flat spot, maybe under a hemlock or dead log, or even like down Ohio, Iowa, Illinois, you got them big open woods. They lay right up against a big oak tree. You know what I mean? Or it's not just laying anywhere. And you could see the size of it. But that buck, I jumped him, and I tracked him probably 400 yards, and I ended up shooting the wrong deer because. When you're tracking deer, you don't have a lot of time. It's like rabbit hunting, You're boom, there you go, shoot. It's not like you look at the rabbit and see how big his ears are and measure them. You know what I mean? You can't judge a deer. And I had a hard time in the past tracking deer because I wanted to shoot, like up Maine, they're worried about body weight, but I'm still a rack hunter. I'm looking for, last year I jumped one and it was 150 incher, and I'm looking, and it was in the snow, and he jumped and he ran. I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll shoot that. I'm like judging it. And by the time I got time to the shot, my shot's gone because I'm just trying to study his rack. He was a good deer. But the one this year, I said, if I tracked him 400 yards, I jumped him back air out of his bed. I said, if I see him, or if I see a deer out in front of me, it's him. I'm shooting, There was no other deer tracks around. So he angled down the hill, and I looked. I seen a deer paw on the ground. I seen rack about 100 yards. I started pumping lead at him, And then I got him. I walked down. I said, man, that ain't the deer I jumped out of the bed back there. I said, this one ain't nowhere near that one. It was like a 2-year-old, And in the meanwhile, when I was shooting at this one, to the left there was a deer stand, and I seen out of the corner of my eye it run over the hill. Well, I got back on the set of tracks that I was following, and when it went down the hill, it veered to the left. So the buck I was after was actually standing to the left there. You know what I mean? But that's another subject. A buddy of mine from Massachusetts, he hunted all over, and man, you could learn I learned so much from him in his experience tracking deer, and that's another thing. A lot of stuff we talk about in the hunting we do doesn't incorporate tracking and learning what the deer do in the snow. Like these people up in Maine and track all these deer in these big woods, they learn so much because they see what the deer do. We see rubs through October, November, and scrapes, and we got to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Now, granted, the wintertime's different, but I went with my buddy Tom. He lives in Massachusetts. He shot them big bucks all through there, and I went tracking with him one day in PA about a few years back. It was like he was like adrenaline junkie. He was like 60 years old. His buck track crossed the road. It was last day of rifle season. Oh, there he is. And we got on a track. I followed him. He said, just follow me, And he, stop. I said, what do you mean stop? Nah, we can't go. He knew when to stop and he knew when to go after the deer. We bumped him. Stop. He knows we're on him. We got to give him some time. And I was like, and then no shit, Tom was like, long story short, he said, hey, he's here. He's going to lay down. I said, motherfucker, how you know he's going to lay down? He's here. He's going to lay down. And fucker was laying there 30 yards. Fucking walked up on him. He missed him. It jumped up and ran, but it was like, and he told me why he was going to lay down and, all this stuff that, just like that you don't see. And now I incorporate like that. I shot that deer this year. I used some of his techniques and that. But like I told you all the time, I said, go out in the winter, just track them. And like a buck trying to find that bit, he was looking for just like, they're just like,
you just learn a lot from
you just learn just in general. You can go, like you said before we started, you can go on we could be here till midnight and keep talking about deer and different situations, but like the biggest thing is if you're wanting to hunt public land, like I said, when I went to Ohio this year, I had butterflies in my stomach. I said, man, this is a lot of acorns here, but the pressure, I didn't know that variable. I didn't know how bad the pressure was. You got to figure out the pressure and how hard them guys are hunting it. And if they're and put your cameras out, see if their deer are there, they're living with them humans. So find out, it's not going to be, if you're going to go out and hope, that ain't no good. I mean, you got to do a lot of work, and the best time to go out is, even if you're not going to hunt like Ohio, if you're not going to go late season hunting, leave your cameras. I say let them soak. Leave them cameras out there. Just let them soak. They'll tell you what's going on in them woods, and you can put the pieces. But don't just have one camera. I mean, you got to have 10, 15 cameras, 3 or 4 in an area here, just to see what's going on. I mean, that's your best way of knowing what caliber animal lives there, if it's something you want to shoot or if he doesn't live there. And then it'll tell you, if you see him all at midnight, then it's probably the hunting pressure, you know what I mean? But, I've hunted a lot of bucks out closer to Ohio, just near southwest PA, just across the border. I mean, a lot of them bucks, sometimes they live right by the road. That one deer was living right along the road. And it makes sense. Why would they be way back in the woods if all the danger comes from the road? The next road's like a mile away. You know what I mean? It's like they want to know. They just like me wanting to know what's going on in the deer woods when I'm going hunting. They want to know what's going on in their life out there in the woods. They're going to lay near the road, near a parking lot, and they're going to watch it. And a lot of times, like down in Ohio, I had my buddy down there, down by Ohio River, near Kentucky. There was this big bowl on both sides of the road, and there was a rub line crossing in public land. And so we went in there and pussyfoot around, found all kind of rubs. And I told my buddy, I said, man, this deer's here. It's here. But we just parked on a road in these bowls. It's like big amphitheater. I said, he's probably laying up one of these points. He probably knows we're parked here. We're done already. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like people don't think it. I said, how about we get out of here? I come back and drop you off. I just keep driving up the road because it's no shit. They're like, he's probably laying up there, and you park and you go in the woods, you climb up your tree. You think he's going to come around? No, he fucking already knows them moves. Like there's another thing I tell people. I said, walk in the woods when you think there's a time to be quiet. When you're hunting and going in, and there's time you can't help but make noise to get to your stand. Always walk like a deer, heel toe. I've killed deer that way.
Say that.
I walked right up on them.
Because that's what the biggest thing when I was up in Alberta, the outfitter there, Jim Holt Jr., which I had on the podcast here, well known for killing big deer. And when he went through training, before we were even allowed to go out in the stand, he made us practice out in the yard walking like a deer.
Yeah.
Because when you walk to your stand, when we drop you off, they dropped us off in like side by sides, he goes, you go heel toe.
Yep.
Heel, couple steps, stop.
Yep. Take a
Couple
grunt call. Yep.
stop. And he's like, you walk like a deer, and then they're not frightened. He goes, they know humans' footsteps.
They know it.
And that's
another big thing is, and another thing, like when I was out in Iowa this year, when you go in the woods an hour before daylight, their brains shut off to humans. It's done. You walk up on them. They'll get up and they'll run, but they'll come back because they don't know. They don't associate. It's all associated. They don't associate with dark with humans being in the woods. I walked up. I went out this year. These does were bedding on this ridge, and I kicked them all. They went. Once I seen them. I had my light on my hat. I could see it still out there 50 yards. Just stood there watching me get up in a tree. It did snort. It didn't. I just stood there. It didn't know what I was. Even though I sound like a human walking through woods, they shut off to that. So it's like good to go in at night.
like when you go check cameras at night. You were telling me before, you love doing that.
I get to a spot, Ohio. I remember my buddy down there. I met up with him, and I said, hey, I got to go. I got to go check my cameras. He said, what? It's 10 o'clock at night. We got beer to drink. I said, no, it's the best time. That's a good spot. The wind's always bad. I can't get in there. I go up 10 o'clock at night, check my cameras, 9, 10 o'clock at night. You know, it's the best time to check them, you know.
Yeah.
Because you can walk up on a deer. You know, you go out there. If it's a spot that you want to hunt, but you don't know what's there, you don't want to walk in there to screw it up. I go there middle of the night, come out of the woods 10, 11, 12 o'clock. I'm still checking cameras. You know what I mean? But the one year I was in Ohio hunting at public land.
You wonder why I said that you were crazy.
But you got to think like that. You know what I mean? Listen to this story. One year I was in Ohio, public land. There's a nice big bowl, right? And there was a power line that went up through the bowl, and I hunted the edge of the power line. I got up in my tree, and a nice 7-point come up that power. The power line was a little thicker, like briars and that. And he went up, you know, when he traveled up and down through that bowl, he hit that power line, and then he crossed the ridge and go to wherever. But it was a nice 7-point, you know, 125, 130 inch 7-point. I said, there's bigger deer. So I let him go. And I ended up shooting a smaller 8-point that evening because the next day I was going to Illinois hunting. So I shot that buck. I called my buddy. I said, come help me It was only an hour from my house, hour and a half. So we went in there, dragged my deer out. And I said, hey, hunt this cherry tree while I'm in Illinois. I said, there's a nice 7-point. It walks up and down this power line. He's here. He crosses. He goes up the hill, crosses the ridge, and down the other side. He uses because there's cover here. So my buddy, he went out there, and he was pulling, a couple of days later, he was pulling his bow up in a tree, that 7-point, come up the hill, come up. He's, oh, man, I couldn't get a shot. That's a nice buck. I would have shot it. So the next year, I went out there. I ended up putting a ground blind up right on the edge of that power line. This is a good story. I put a ground blind up, and there wasn't much sign there. And I hunted it a couple times. So I moved on. That was before trail cameras and shit, you know. I left there, and I come back a year later, right? And I said, I'm going to go try that spot out. I said, I wonder if my ground blind's still there. I took my stand with me, and I walked the ridge. The power line went up to the ridge, you know. But I walked the ridge in. There was kind of a little trail on a ridge, and I walked down along the edge of the power line. But it was a huge bowl, like an amphitheater. And it was one of them evenings. It was like you could hear your heartbeat. You could hear a pin fall. You know what I mean? The leaves were dry, crunchy as like could be. So I walked the ridge, and I wanted to cut and go down along that power line. I took my stand, and the blind was about 50 yards down. I walked down, just like you said, heel toe, little grunt, bleat, whatever. Because there was no way I can get down 50 yards being that quiet. If there's a deer anywhere in that bowl, he's going to hear a human. So I got that. My blind was there. It was, no one touched it, but it was collapsed. You know, I didn't have the tents. So I popped my blind up. I jump in there, and I sit down. 5:25, I hear, I said, oh, here comes a big deer. I heard him cough. I've heard a lot of big deer cough. They're so sure of what they're doing in life. They're not afraid to cough and hack. That's why sometimes in the woods I cough. It doesn't bother them. A deer cough, snort, you know, it's the same deal. It's that same 7-point 3 years in a row. He lived at the bottom of that power line, walked up and down that power line. I shot him that day. He come up that power line, was going to cross that ridge right before dark. He was like 147-inch 7-point.
That's crazy.
But it was
I know that bucket's on your wall.
Yeah, there was no and that's another thing. He was living on public land, but he was going to private land at night. There was no rubs in there. It's you know, that's why the cameras got to help. And I mean, there's a lot of places in Ohio, like a place I find all them little doe tracks. There's a big buck, another spot down there. There ain't no rubs or no sign of a buck in there, but I know there's a monster in there because I seen him across that one I told you. I seen cross the road come out of them cedars.
Yeah.
Looked like a mule deer. It was this tall. I went in there. Ain't no sign of a big buck. I mean, sometimes it's driving down a road or just having a ton of cameras out, and you don't know. Like it's just like an individual. You know what I mean? Some bucks don't scrape a lot. Some bucks do scrape a lot. That's why I like hunting an individual animal and just learn what he does and find out him. But it's just And at one time in Illinois, I was hunting this one finger in between. It was a bean field, and this creek bottom. These fingers went up into the bean field. I went in there and I put a stand up. And I end up rattling. I don't rattle a lot. I rattled a buck in. He come in from 100 yards away, beeline right to me, went around me. I don't know if I missed him or what. Like 145-inch 10 or something. He went back out of sight. And as soon as he went, that's another thing about moving your stand, you got to be mobile. As soon as he went out of sight, he was coming from that direction. As soon as he went out of sight, I got down, I took my stand as far as I could see where he went out of sight, and I put my stand. I said, I'm hunting there tomorrow. He's coming from there. I don't know if he's bedding over. I didn't even know the area. I don't know if he's bedding over there. So the next morning, I went. It was a frosty, cold morning. You could hear for a mile. My last 100 yards to my stand, heel toe. My stand was on like a little grassy right-of-way, and the reason I got right on the edge of that right-of-way, I could see left, I could see up the right-of-way 50, 60 yards, and down the right-of-way. It was like, and if a deer, they were like crossing that right-of-way, I could shoot them on it, nice open shot. I got that last 100 yards, I got to my stand, I did heel toe. He was laying under my tree stand, that buck, that same buck at 145-inch 10. He waited till I was 35 yards away. He got up and it was like barely daylight. And he just walked off. But he was so confused because he heard a deer, but he couldn't see a deer. He didn't see a human. He was trying to, there was like a big morph in his brain going on. He didn't know what to do. So he walked off in the distance. I climbed my stand. My steps were on the backside. I climbed up my tree. He stood there about 50, 60 yards till I sat down in my tree stand. Then he did a big circle around me. He went downwind, didn't smell me, and he went out of sight. And I think that I stayed there. I didn't see him. I rattled him back in that evening. He come right to my tree. He come dead. He knew something was up with that spot. He heard a buck walk to that, but it was so his head was confused. You know what I mean? Yeah. But he came in. I didn't get a shot at him, but I shot a buck later that afternoon there. But just that hill, like I tell, and so I said, people, you park on a road, like down Ohio, like he's like a big, he's laying up on them points. He got them radars on the side of his head, and they're just going like this. You park on a road, you get out, you talk, you go up in the woods. You think he's going to come down there? There's just so many things. You just think, they want to know what, just like you want to know. I want to know what's going on in my woods when I go hunting. They want to know what's going on in their world too. They'll sit up there and they'll listen. And it's just people will blow their cover before they even get a chance to hunt that deer. Like I said, my buddy, I said, I'll drop you off in the evening. I said, his deer's living here. He's crossing here, but he's probably up on one of these points. I said, we parked here. Let's get out of here. I said, if I come back, I'll drop you off. You sneak up in there, and we don't know which point he was on. He was probably laying on one of them points, So we didn't hunt there that evening, but we left. I said, you know what? The next day, I said, I'm going to go put a couple cameras right there. I took 3 cameras. It was only 150 yards from the road. I know he's crossing the road. He was somewhere. I didn't know what that deer was doing, but I had a feeling he was living there. And I have some rubs from last year. He's been living there for a couple years. My guess he's a 150-inch deer. I went up in there. I took some cameras. I popped one up. I had another one. I'm looking around, standing. I said, this deer walks right through here. I know he walks right through here. I tripped over his horn from 2 years before. It was laying there. It was about 130. It was buried under the leaves. I trip over a lot of horns because you get in that spot, you look around because you're looking out, you ain't looking straight down at your toes. I tripped over him. I said, there's his horn. I put the camera right there where his horn was. But he's going to come through there, you know what I mean? But it's just it's just amazing though. They just amaze me. I think, but the reason they amaze me because when I was a kid, wasn't brought up around big. Maybe if I was brought up in Illinois or Iowa, I seen big bucks. I would take it maybe for granted that I had these animals, but where we lived, they were spikes and 4s were like, that was like, and then when I was young, I'd shoot a 4 or 6, man. That was better than sliced red right there, boy. But then you evolve from that, but you still have that mentality where you don't take it for granted. And then a lot of times I'll go out to Iowa and Illinois, and a lot of locals hunt that public land, but they don't. It's not they take it for granted because they're there.
Yeah.
The bigger deer, the more deer are there, so they're not going to work like someone like me or you will to get that deer because it's like,
Yeah.
it's there tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but it's all in where you're hunting. Learn that animal, and talk to people that hunt that area. Don't, as I said about the, Chinese, the guy lives in China is different than me or you, his daily life. So, you got to go over there and learn what he likes to do. If you know what I'm saying, it's just like, it's a different, how he inhibits his habitat and what he does and how he moves and how he feeds and how he thinks.
Well, we were joking today. I was with one of my buddies I was telling you he's Navy SEAL, and I was like, I gotta have you on the podcast. You could teach us how to hunt a different species.
Yeah.
And he started joking. He goes, "That's similar." He goes, "You got to learn everything." He goes, "Except for humans are dumber than deer." That's the way he put it. But you have to, like you said, put yourself in their environment and learn it. But hopefully, everyone listening to this had their notebook out for this one. It's definitely a long one, but for good reason, because I think John and I could sit here, like you said, till midnight at 1 o'clock in the morning and just keep talking about.
Yeah, I mean it's a never ending, and like even when I do go with people, like my buddy I took down Ohio, I kept asking him, "What do you think? What do you think? What do you?" I asked him his opinion because he sees different than me. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not the best hunter in the world. Yeah, I learned from them animals, but he said, "Why are you asking me? I'm not the buck. I don't know." I said, "Yeah, but you have your own take on a deer that maybe," that's why I said, you can learn.
That you didn't think of.
Yeah, I talk to every type of hunter, not a beginner. So maybe he has an idea that I didn't think of. You know what I mean? But, but public land's tough. It's challenging and, you know. So
I think if anyone is whitetail fanatics like us, and I think you could tell by the excitement in your voice talking about these things and everything, like this is what you get off to is these whitetails and hunting them, and I think this one's going to be a real helpful one. I didn't even have to ask the questions because a lot of the ones I was going to ask you answered in your stories and stuff that I think people will learn a lot from it. Not like you said, it's not just hunting Pennsylvania or anything. It's just I think a lot of your points will really go across to everywhere, and just being able to adapt, be mobile. And
it's not black and white. That's the biggest thing.
And another thing you said too was like you don't learn an area the first time you're in there.
No.
So like if you're going, say, a public land spot, plan to hunt it for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, you're right.
And not just say, oh, I didn't have success one year. There's a whole bunch of people there. Well, where were these people? Maybe next year you go where they weren't.
You're right. And another thing before we're done here, Bo, is before the Onyx and all this, Google Maps, like I said, I found public lands that were producing, and people move into these areas and start hunting this area, but that doesn't mean another spot exists, because that people ain't always going to hunt that spot, but I've had, and you got to be optimistic, but you got to be honest with yourself, what's going on, you know what I mean? Hey, I found spots in different states, different public land that it was just hot as hell, man. Look at these rubs, look at the sign of these bugs there. But then people move in, a bunch of places, but you got to be honest, like, hey, these guys are hunting this. I got to move on. You got to keep it. But that's what I like is finding that area because it's there. There's but a lot
that hidden gem somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the hunt for me.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about that, and we won't dig into it a whole bunch yet because I'm sure we'll be talking more about it. But we're talking about going to different areas and hunting. You're like, let's just pick up and go to a different part of the state.
Yeah,
let's
to find that. That's to find that spot that nobody's in. When I remember liking those spots, you go in and find them big rubs. Let's just go find that new spot. Find it out there.
And that's I always with East Meets West and everything, I always have like kind of the slogan is how you define adventure, and the reason for that is because like that's the way we define it is finding that new thing gets you excited and running with it. So and John, as far as is there any other last takeaways that you'd think of, or do you think kind of covered it there.
I think we covered most, but like the biggest thing, if you're interested in hunting public land, it's tough, but you got to know what's going on in that particular area, not just any area you hunt, because every area is different, every animal is different, nothing's
public, private,
black and
same
white.
thing.
It's gray, and you have to put your time in, and don't be afraid to scout that land. Don't be afraid to run through the woods. I don't care if, like I said, the other day, I got to cover as much ground as I can. The leaves were down. It was damp. I'm going to find leaves turned up. I want to find fresh shit. I want to see, because I don't want to sit here and just because I don't want to screw up what's over there. Find that hot sign. Find that fresh scrape. Get out there and put your boots on and hike it, but then also know that you are, pressuring them deer, but they're there for a reason. And like I said, the biggest thing is like I said down in Ohio, you people don't realize you park on a road here, them deer up on them points, they just got them radars, they're just moving around, it's just watch what you do, you know what I mean?
Think outside the box and be careful what
just
you're
put
doing.
yourself in the woods looking for a human coming in after you. What are you going to do? I'm going to hide up here where I can see down here, you know what I mean? So, think out anything black and white and learn the animal, the area, the habitat, the best you can. And don't, like I said, don't be afraid to waste a day or so, like you said, and blow through that and scout it. Maybe sit and watch a field for an evening. Don't waste your 5-day. A lot of people have a 4 or 5 day hunt. Don't waste that just picking a tree and getting up in a good tree and waste your time. Or like I said, I got butterflies because I didn't know the variable of the hunting pressure. It was like, oh, are these deer all nocturnal in here? Or is it so? Put your cameras out. Maybe go out in the summer if you're going to hunt something. You got a piece of public land picked out. Go out in the summer, fall. Take 10 cameras. Take a climbing stick. Put them up in trees. Leave them there till you come back in October. That's the best thing you could do. Let them soak. All the way through October, November. But know the area and don't hope on a deer coming through. Don't leave anything up to hope.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So, John, where can people find you on your Instagram? What's your handle there?
The Johnny Stewart.
The Johnny Stewart.
That's it,
All right, I'll include that in the show notes as well. But yeah, John, good luck in Ohio coming up here this weekend. Hopefully, this will probably release here in a couple weeks. So hopefully, by that time, you'll have a buck on the ground.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. All right, John. Well, hey, thank you very much for coming on. Appreciate you talking.
Anytime. I like helping. I like to share my knowledge, my experience,
Yeah.
help other people,
And I've learned a lot, like I said, in the last few years from you and just thinking outside the box. Like the things you say, I'm like, I never read about this in any magazine.
Yeah, and another thing I always did, I get up in a tree, I take my bow rope, take a stick and bounce it on the ground. Sound like a deer walking. You got some dry leaves because, you've been in an area, a lot of public land, I don't even use a grunt call. Up here, grunting's pretty good. Ratio's pretty good. They'll come into a grunt, but sometimes they need like two things, like hear and see something, smell something, see something just that big lazy, but I ain't going over there. I'm dominant. I'm the man here. You come to me. I ain't fucking going there. Like that one last year I was hunting there. I grunted at him. He's like, "Get. I ain't going over there," but I would bounce a stick on the ground with my bow rope, about a 5-6 foot stick, about an inch. Just make it sound like a deer. Hit the grunt call, hit the bleat call. So it's like something happening in this area, not just and buggers pinpoint you up in a tree. But if they hear that, come to life out there. But I don't know. Them are all my tips.
Those are your tips.
That's a couple of them.
I know.
But like you say, you can go on forever. Just shit that mainly experiences that I had in the last 25 years, taken off from October to January. The last couple of years I didn't take as much time off because of my work schedule, but and it's my brain's like a sponge when it comes to that stuff. And I ask myself, I kind of quit. How come this happened? And before Google Maps, I used to grid areas of the forest off and walk it till I had that picture in my mind the way Google Maps is, so I could see it the way a deer would see it. Yeah. You know what I mean? But now them Google Maps shows you topo and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the biggest thing is, like you said, go to public land, boots on the ground, because there's a lot you're not going to see on Google Maps or Onyx that you have to see what they're eating, where they're traveling, where they're bedding. And it's just a combination of variety of things, bedding and stuff like that. But yeah, just get out there and go out in the summertime, or go out in the spring before the following year. if you're going to go want to hunt somewhere next fall, you know what I mean? Go out there in March, maybe May, April before the leaves. I mean, I'm up here, everybody's turkey hunting in May, and it's still brown. I'm still looking for horns, you know?
Yeah.
But you could see the stuff from the year before, rubs, and, you know, a lot of times, I'll try to spot next year, you know what I mean? You don't see a lot of, you know, and I'm always looking for human pressure, tree stands, and so, yeah, well.
Awesome. Well, hey, again, thanks, John, and I'm sure this won't be the last time that we're talking on here, so thank you, and good luck in Ohio, buddy.
All right, thanks, Will.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.